Chapter 753. Magistrate Yang didn't expect that Mrs. Yuan would say that. He was upset and worried about serious things. Now he was reprimanded and slandered about his relationship with Qiu Feishan. More importantly, Qiu Feishan's identity couldn't be publicized, which meant that Magistrate Yang couldn't explain it clearly. Magistrate Yang was so angry that his face turned blue. He scolded, "Don't be unreasonable. I have nothing to do with her at all. She is about the same age as our daughter. Who do you think I am? Did I stab you in the heart? Even if you yell at me with a pale face, you can't hide the filthy things you've done. I think you're simply an ungrateful person. You've even forgotten the feelings we had back then." Magistrate Yang was annoyed by her crying, but he couldn't explain her accusations. He couldn't let her know everything that happened outside, in case she didn't have a lock on her mouth and talked about everything when she went out. Magistrate Yang couldn't stay in the room any longer. He took the invitation and walked away. Mrs. Yuan thought of Magistrate Yang's indifferent attitude towards her. He was no longer as gentle as he was when he was young. She immediately cried even more sadly. Magistrate Yang stood in the corridor and flipped the invitation in his hand over and over again. Hearing the cries of Madame Yuan, who was just a door away, he became more and more impatient. He said in a low voice through the door, "Tomorrow, Prince Zhongshan will be hosting a banquet in his manor. He has invited you and me to go." As soon as he finished speaking, the door was hit by something. With a bang, there was a sharp sound of broken porcelain falling to the ground. "I won't go. You have someone to accompany you. Why drag me, a chaff, to make you lose face? Go find your good niece. You ignorant and stupid woman, making trouble without reason." Magistrate Yang was so angry that he left. Mrs. Yuan didn't hear the sound outside for a long time. When she opened the door, there was no one outside. Even the servants were nowhere to be seen. She was so angry that she cried even more fiercely. Qin Yining and Pang Xiao were naturally not interested in the quarrel between the couple in Magistrate Yang's mansion. At this time, the two of them were discussing the process of the banquet tomorrow. There was no one around him. Even Bing Tang and the other Qin Yining players went to do their own things. He discussed the plan with Pang Xiao in a low voice and whispered his suggestions to Pang Xiao. Pang Xiao's phoenix-like eyes lit up as she listened. She couldn't help but scratch Qin Yining's nose. "You're so clever. Why do you always come up with so many clever ideas whenever I ask you to research something? I'm influenced by the company I keep. I've been with you all day, so naturally, I've come up with all sorts of ideas." Pang Xiao chuckled at her words. "Although you're praising me, why do I feel that it's weird?" Qin Yining pursed his lips and laughed silently. "All right, you dare to tease me. Let's see how I'll deal with you." Pang Xiao put her finger to her mouth and blew on it. She pounced on Qin Yining and scratched him. Qin Yining was extremely ticklish. He laughed so hard that he couldn't breathe. He dodged and begged Pang Xiao for mercy. After a long time, he finally made Pang Xiao stop. Pang Xiao admired Qin Yining's blushing face and sparkling eyes. He felt that the girl in his arms was warm and fragrant. Even her breath was sweet. He couldn't help but pull her onto his lap and kiss her. In the end, Qin Yining was so angry that he pounded his chest while panting. Pang Xiao only stopped temporarily. "Don't be serious. I'm talking about serious matters. If you continue to touch me, I won't talk to you anymore." All right. I won't tease you anymore. Hurry up and tell me." Pang Xiao smiled and moved her ear closer to him. Qin Yining explained his idea in detail. After discussing it with Pang Xiao, they decided on a plan. The next day, Magistrate Yang came with his wife, Yuan. Pang Xiao and Qin Yining were both in casual clothes. They smiled and greeted them at the gate of the mansion. When Magistrate Yang saw that Pang Xiao and Qin Yining went straight to the gate of the mansion, he relaxed a lot. He knew the relationship between Qiu Feishan and the army. He also knew about Pang Xiao. Now he still had to rely on Qiu Feishan to support the army. He secretly regarded Pang Xiao's courtesy as his flattery and intimacy to Qiu Feishan. Magistrate Yang didn't put on airs. He smiled and cupped his hands, saying, "Sorry to disturb you." "You're welcome. Your presence brings light to my humble house. Please come in. Please." Pang Xiao and Magistrate Yang walked half a body's length away from each other. Qin Yining smiled and greeted Yuan. He said with a smile, "Why didn't you bring your daughter to walk around with you?" Yuan's eyes were still a little swollen. Before she came, she also held her breath. However, she didn't want to embarrass herself in front of outsiders. This matter was also her family's business. Yuan squeezed out a smile and said, "She caught a cold these 2 days. It's not convenient for her to go out. She's also afraid that it'll be bad if she gets sick." "Really? It's cold these days and nights. She should pay more attention to her health," Qin Yining said with a smile. The two chatted casually and followed Pang Xiao and Magistrate Yang into the garden. Qin's mansion had been renovated. A lot of flowers and plants were transplanted in the garden. At this time, the flowers and trees were gorgeous. The clear lake reflected the weeping willows by the lake. It was a secluded scenery. Yuan couldn't help but praise, "The mansion is really beautiful. Being able to live here and just looking at the scenery makes people feel relaxed and happy. If Furin doesn't mind, you can often come to the mansion as a guest. It just so happens that I don't have anyone to talk to here," Qin Yining invited with a smile. Yuan thought for a moment. Although she was only the wife of the magistrate, there was no other woman in the area who had a higher status than her. She was worthy of being the wife of the Prince Zhongshuan. Naturally, she nodded with a smile and said, "Many thanks for Wang Fei's kindness. Then I will often come to disturb you in the future. I hope Wang Fei won't mind." "How could I? I'm more than happy." They walked all the way to the banquet hall. The round table was already prepared with food and wine. Because there were only 2 couples and no one else, there was no need to adhere to the rules. After sitting down according to their status, the 2 sides began to toast. Magistrate Yang saw that Qiu Feishan took the initiative to get close to Pang Xiao. He also wanted to be on good terms with Pang Xiao. His words were like a spring breeze. Pang Xiao was naturally happy to cater. He had never been so harmonious with Magistrate Yang before. Qin Yining and Yuan spoke in a low voice. Both sides were very polite and appeared to be very close. After 3 rounds of wine and 5 dishes, the family banquet was coming to an end. Magistrate Yang stood up and said with a smile, "Many thanks for Wang Yi and Wang Fei's hospitality. It's late now, so we'll take our leave." Yuan also stood up and prepared to leave. Pang Xiao and Qin Yining both stood up. Pang Xiao stepped forward and faintly blocked Qin Yining. He said with a smile, "I didn't have a chance to talk with Magistrate Yang before. Today, I really regret that I didn't meet you sooner. Magistrate Yang and Madam, why don't you stay in my humble home? You and I can often talk. Isn't that good?" Magistrate Yang was slightly tipsy and didn't notice anything wrong. He declined with a smile, "No. Many thanks for Wang Ye's hospitality. There will be more opportunities to talk in the future. It's better to stay. There will be no one at home at this time." Pang Xiao smiled. Magistrate Yang was stunned. He blinked his drunken eyes and didn't understand what was going on. Chapter 754. Assassination. Pang Xiao waved towards the door. Ji Yun and Xian Yun immediately supported a young girl to walk in. Upon closer inspection, it was Magistrate Yang's daughter. Father, mother. Miss Yang entered the door and bowed with a smile. She held Madame Yuan's arm and said, "Mother, why did you ask me to come here?" Madame Yuan's body trembled violently. She widened her eyes in horror and shook her head. "Why? What does Wang Yi want to do?" Magistrate Yang immediately sobered up. "What do you mean, Your Highness?" Pang Xiao smiled. This king and Magistrate Yang had a good chat. Therefore, he invited Magistrate Yang's family to stay at my house for a while. We can often have a long talk. Isn't that good? Magistrate Yang was shocked and angry. Even if he was drunk, he could understand Pang Xiao's meaning. Was he going to imprison his family? I appreciate Wang Ye's kindness. If you want to meet, it is very easy. There will be many opportunities in the future. Wang Yi, please stay. I will take my leave. Magistrate Yang grabbed Madame Yuan with one hand and his daughter with the other and turned to leave. However, the outside of the reception hall was surrounded by Jinghu Wei. It was so crowded that not even a drop of water could pass through. Magistrate Yang's coachmen and bodyguards had already been warmly taken away by Pang Xiao's servants to eat and rest. Now, there were no bodyguards around them. Magistrate Yang suddenly turned back. He had completely sobered up in horror. Did Your Highness plan this from the beginning? What do you want to do? Do you want to rebel? As soon as he said this, Madame Yuan held her daughter tightly in her arms. Her eyes widened in horror and she was so frightened that she hid behind Magistrate Yang. Pang Xiao was still smiling. Magistrate Yang, don't randomly accuse this king. This king can't afford it. He just asked Magistrate Yang's family to stay at his house for a few days. How can you say that he is rebelling? With a wave of his hand, Huzi immediately understood Pang Xiao's intention and led his men to surround Magistrate Yang. Magistrate, please. A guest room has been prepared for you. You can rest and sober up after drinking too much. Huzi smiled. Magistrate Yang was furious. How dare you, Meng Zhishi? You must have eaten a leopard's guts. In any case, I am an official of the imperial court, a magistrate personally appointed by your majesty. How dare you kidnap me? Pang Xiao was too lazy to argue with Magistrate Yang anymore. Magistrate Yang would have to stay for a while no matter how much he said or how little he said. Therefore, he didn't say much and just let them take him away. Magistrate Yang was shocked and angry. He screamed, "I must report you. Let your majesty punish him severely. You are such a traitor." Pang Xiao took Qin Yining's hand and followed the troops out of the flower hole. He smiled and said, "Before that, this king will also tell your majesty that Magistrate Yang colluded with merchants and influenced the imperial court's decisions and personnel. This is a complicated relationship, and I believe your majesty will be very interested." Magistrate Yang couldn't say anything at all. It was as if a raw egg was stuffed in his mouth. He could only open his mouth wide and gasp for breath. Under his panic, Madame Yuan and Miss Yang had already been scared to tears. Naturally, they didn't know what Magistrate Yang had done outside, so they more or less complained in their hearts. Magistrate Yang, on the other hand, was completely stunned. He had indeed colluded with businessmen to influence the imperial court. After contacting Qiu Feishan, gaining her trust, and listening to Qiu Feishan's orders for several times, Magistrate Yang thought that what he had done must not be discovered by others. He must be very careful. But now, his mistake was in Pang Xiao's hands. Magistrate Yang came to his senses. He was too confident before, and it was also because things had been going smoothly for too long. He forgot that the person in front of him was not a soft persimmon that could be bullied, but a fierce beast that couldn't be provoked. Now that Qiu Feishan was nowhere to be found, and there was no one around to guard him, Pang Xiao naturally wanted to take advantage of this opportunity to take revenge. Magistrate Yang thought a lot, but in fact, it was just a breath. At this time, his family was about to be surrounded by a group of strong men with weapons in their hands. Magistrate Yang hurriedly turned back. If Wang Yi cares about the previous food and salary, we can discuss it. You don't have to do this. Pang Xiao narrowed his eyes and smiled very gently, but he didn't care about Magistrate Yang's begging at all, as if he didn't hear it at all. Magistrate Yang saw that his begging didn't work, so he scolded again. Pang Zhishi, you traitor, you want to betray the country. I must impeach you. Pang Xiao didn't care about it at all. When the people went away and the other side's scolding couldn't be heard, Qin Yining asked Pang Xiao, is my idea not good? In fact, I'm also afraid that your majesty will take advantage of this matter to do something. Don't think so much. This is also a critical moment in time. We have a grudge with the Qiu family, and in the future, we won't be able to get any funding from the Four Links. Raising such a big army, the people eat and the horses eat, and also the food and salary. If we don't have money, won't we go back to the way it was before? Yes. Qin Yining said helplessly, after weighing the pros and cons, we still use Magistrate Yang's seal to take the silver rice from the storehouse to appease the army for the time being. We don't know when the Qiu family will target us. If we don't manage the army well, won't we be attacked from both inside and outside? That's right. And Magistrate Yang is indeed not a good person. I have a lot of evidence in my hands about what he did outside. If he impeaches me, the evidence will be useful. It's fine. Pang Xiao put her arm around Qin Yining's shoulder and walked all the way to Snow Pear Courtyard. She said in a low voice, I have arranged for people to guard the courtyard where Magistrate Yang's family lives. You must pay attention to their food and drink, and the people who serve them must be polite. Don't neglect them. You must treat them as if they are guests. I know. Don't worry, I will be careful. Qin Yining smiled and looked up at Pang Xiao. From Pang Xiao's angle, he could see her small fan-like long eyelashes fluttering, leaving a faint shadow under her eyes. Her watery eyes curved slightly when she smiled, and her eyes were as bright as two lakes. Good girl. Pang Xiao couldn't help rubbing her forehead with her chin. Pang Xiao sent Qin Yining back to rest. Not long after, Huzi came. Wang Yi, everything is going according to plan. Our people have already obtained the magistrate's seal. Pang Xiao stood up and said, let's go. The next step is to take control of the treasury. Yes. Huzi immediately responded. Qin Yining looked worriedly at Pang Xiao's tall figure. Pang Xiao seemed to sense something. He turned around and smiled at Qin Yining, you should sleep early. I will send you a message after I have taken care of everything. After that, he had to return to the military camp. Qin Yining nodded and said, I know. Be careful. Qin Yining, Bing Tang, and Ji Yun watched Pang Xiao leave before returning to their rooms. Ji Yun and Bing Tang looked at each other. They both noticed that Qin Yining seemed to be in low spirits. Bing Tang comforted her softly, Princess, don't worry. Wang Yi has so many people around him. Moreover, this matter is not very difficult. This is much more convenient than going to Jianchuan City to rescue you. Facing a place like Jianchuan, Wang Yi still did not lose a single hair. Qin Yining pulled the two maidservants' hands and sat down at the square table. He said, I am just worried about how this matter will develop in the future. We have already offended the Qiu family. To avoid being retaliated against in the future, Wang Yi and I had no choice but to come back and make the first move. However, Wang Yi is now at the heart of the struggle. If we make a mistake, Your Majesty will have something on us. I am worried that there will be a problem. It is as if there is a needle hanging in my heart. It pricks me from time to time. However, at this point, there was no other way. Ji Yun and Bing Tang could not think of any other way to comfort Qin Yining. They could only change the topic and talk about something else. In the afternoon, Pang Xiao returned. Don't worry. Everything is going smoothly. We have already taken control of the treasury. Once I finish dealing with the military matters, I will release Magistrate Yang. Qin Yining smiled and said, we finally managed to gain some time. On our way back, we were delayed for some time. No matter how slow the Chiu family's actions are, they should have made their next move. I thought that it would only be in the last few days, and they will only target the military matters. You're right. Pang Xiao smiled and put his arm around Qin Yining's shoulder. We have already made sufficient preparations. We are not afraid of what the Chiu family will do. Don't worry. Although your idea is good, I will only do it if I think it is feasible. My judgment will not be wrong. Don't worry. Did he see through her nervousness and dejection? Qin Yining leaned on Pang Xiao's shoulder and gently nodded. I understand. Don't worry. In the end, Pang Xiao still had to oversee the military. Daily drill was indispensable. Therefore, he only had a meal with Qin Yining and hurried back. Brother Han and Brother Zhao were not at home. Qin Yining did not have a child to take care of. There was nothing for her to do, so she suddenly became idle. Qin Yining simply sewed with Bing Tang, Ji Yun, and Xian Yun. She was preparing to personally sew a cloak for Pang Xiao. Although it seemed that the days were very peaceful, in fact, Qin Yining had been anxiously waiting for the Chiu family to make their move. 7 days later, Pang Xiao returned home. Sister Yi, my people just brought news from Jianchuan City, Pang Xiao said with a serious expression. Something happened to the Chiu family. I'm afraid they can't take care of us. Qin Yining turned pale with fright. The Chiu family is such a big family. It has been peaceful for more than 100 years. What could happen? Pang Xiao said, Chiu Guang was murdered. Qin Yining was stunned when she heard that. And the murderer is Chiu Yuanqing. How do you know who the murderer is? Did your people find out? That's not the case. Chiu Yuanqing tried to assassinate Chiu Guang, but did not clean up the mess. Now, the Chiu family and all the people of Jianchuan know that Chiu Yuanqing killed his father to become the head of the family. I'm afraid he will never be able to wash away his infamy. Chapter 755. That's why I said he's stupid. Pang Xiao hugged Qin Yining and placed her on his lap. He rocked her gently as if he was coaxing a child. To think that such a disloyal, unfilial, heartless, and unrighteous fool could become a candidate for the successor of the clan head. Chiu Guang must have been blind to have chosen him. Or maybe there's no one better than Chiu Yuanqing in the family. Qin Yining looked back at Pang Xiao with a smile and analyzed, in my opinion, the only people who can be considered important in the family are Old Master Chiu and Chiu Feishan. Most of the others have been spoiled and are not material to carry the family. It's a pity that the family doesn't like Chiu Feishan because she's a woman. This is the narrow-mindedness of their family. It's also why Chiu Guang can't compare to father-in-law. I've never seen father-in-law look down on you because you're a woman. When it's important, he's also willing to listen to your opinion. That's right. Qin Yining lowered her eyes and smiled. Thinking of her father, she felt a little disappointed. She was actually a little homesick. She missed her father in the capital. She also missed her mother, her 2 grandmothers, and her 2 precious children. It was a pity that the current situation did not allow their family to be reunited and live together peacefully. Pang Xiao had Qin Yining in his heart, so naturally, he was paying attention to her every move at all times. When her mood was a little down, he immediately sensed it. He carefully tightened his arms around her and planted a light kiss on her temple. "Are you homesick?" His voice was low and deep. When he softened his voice, it was even more magnetic. Qin Yining's heart thumped when she heard it. She shook her head and said, "It's okay. I know they're doing well. And I'm married. My home is here." Pang Xiao laughed and said, "Is this girl muddle-headed? Why is your home here? Are you talking about the old residence of the Qin family?" "Of course not." Qin Yining shook her head and smiled, "Because you're here." Pang Xiao's heart thumped. That numbing sense of happiness was like being patted on the back of his hand by a furry kitten with its fleshy paw. "My good sister Yi, why are you so good? I really like you more and more, more and more." Pang Xiao buried his face in Qin Yining's shoulder and gently rocked her. Her arms were held by Pang Xiao so she couldn't hug him back. She could only turn her face to the side and gently kissed his hair. Pang Xiao seemed to have sensed something. He pinched her chin and bit her lips eagerly. He sucked on her lips forcefully and wrapped his arms around her tightly. His large hands wandered around her back and touched her shoulder blades. He loosened his grip and pecked her affectionately. He said in a muffled voice, "Sister Yi, you've lost so much weight. Must be your husband's not to. Tell me, how should I punish you?" Qin Yining's breathing was a little rapid. His big hands had reached into her clothes. She pushed him away shyly. "Don't make trouble. It's broad daylight." Pang Xiao laughed softly in her ear in a low and hoarse voice, "I don't want to. I want to make trouble. I want to make trouble for our sister Yi." As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly stood up and strode into the room with her in his arms. Qin Yining was so tired that he didn't have any strength left. He fell asleep with his head on Pang Xiao's arm. Before he fell asleep, he was still thinking that he hadn't finished talking about the current situation of the Chiu family. The next time he talked about serious matters with Pang Xiao, he must stay away from him. In the evening, Qin Yining was dug out of the bed by Pang Xiao. He put on a snow-white undergarment and a honey-colored robe in a daze. Pang Xiao's gaze deepened as he looked at her messy long hair hanging over her shoulders and back. Her small, fair face was as big as a palm, and her red lips were slightly swollen. There were even a few light-colored marks on her collarbone. Pang Xiao's eyes darkened as he hurriedly buttoned up her dress. "Get up and eat something. You can't sleep anymore. Otherwise, you won't be able to sleep in the middle of the night." Qin Yining's waist and back were aching. He didn't have any strength. He simply hugged Pang Xiao's waist and buried his face in his stomach. "I'm not hungry at all. I still want to sleep." Her hot breath fell on his abdomen through the undergarment. Pang Xiao hurriedly pushed the little girl away. He stretched out his hand to get a handkerchief from the wash basin shelf to wipe her face. After the warm handkerchief wiped her face, the water vapor cooled down. Qin Yining finally woke up. "You're awake." Pang Xiao couldn't help laughing. Qin Yining also couldn't help smiling back. Her watery eyes were curved. "I'm awake." Pang Xiao took a pair of embroidered shoes with soft soles and helped her put them on. He also took a white jade hairpin and clumsily helped her tie up her long hair. Qin Yining smiled and let him do whatever he wanted. She didn't even cry out in pain when her hair was pulled. Pang Xiao touched Qin Yining's little dimple with his index finger. He took her hand and said, "Let's go. It's time to eat." Qin Yining learned a lot of rules. One of them was not to talk while eating. Pang Shao was used to being a rough man in the army. Besides, there were only the two of them here, so they didn't pay attention to those troublesome rules. They continued to talk to Qin Yining about the Chiu family situation while eating. It turned out that after Chiu Yuanqing succeeded in assassinating Chiu Guang, the matter was exposed, causing the Chiu family to split into two factions. One faction supported Chiu Yuanqing, while the other faction supported Chiu Feishan. They wanted to find Chiu Feishan and avenge Chiu Guang. It's a pity that Chiu Feishan was taken away by Mu Jinghu. We don't even know where she is. They didn't want to support Chiu Feishan since a long time ago. Now that something has happened, they're placing their hopes on her. They don't even mind that she's a woman. It's really ridiculous. But at least something like this happened to the Chiu family. The pressure on us is suddenly reduced. The Chiu family can't even take care of themselves now. If we don't work together, there's nothing to be afraid of. But we can't let our guard down. It's still better to be on guard. I know. Good girl, eat a piece of meat. Pang Shao saw that Qin Yining only ate vegetables, so he picked a piece of mutton and put it in her bowl. Qin Yining pursed her lips and smiled. After eating the mutton, she said, I'm afraid I'll get fat if I eat too much meat for dinner. Pang Shao's hand paused and he stared at her with his phoenix eyes. Don't tell me you don't eat well at dinner. Do you know that you're so thin now that I feel uncomfortable holding you? Qin Yining subconsciously looked down at her chest. Then she realized what she was thinking and her face turned red. Pang Shao also saw her appearance, and a certain part of his body started to heat up again. He put down the bowl and slowly picked up the teacup to take a sip of tea. In his heart, he was thinking that perhaps his wife was right. He should eat less meat that night to avoid getting heaty. Pang Shao accompanied Qin Yining at home for 2 days, then rushed back to the military camp. Qin Yining started to do needlework again. She was going to make a few clothes for her parents, Pang Shao, and the 2 children. Because the Chiu family was in chaos, Qin Yining knew that they had no time to deal with Pang Shao, so he was temporarily relieved. Magistrate Yang's family's short stay in the Qin manor could also end. Qin Yining personally went to let the family of 3 leave. They had been away from the courtyard for several days. When Magistrate Yang saw Qin Yining, he gave a heavy snort and fiercely waved his arms behind his back. His sleeves made a loud noise. Yuan Shi and Miss Yang were slightly nervous. They held Magistrate Yang's arms on both sides. They were afraid that he was stubborn and would cause trouble again. What if the Wang Fei was so angry that she didn't let them go? Fortunately, Qin Yining didn't want to keep them and make him angry. I haven't been a good host these days. Magistrate Yang, Madam, and your daughter are welcome to come to the manor as guests at any time. This king's wife will definitely welcome you. Magistrate Yang was so angry that his eyes turned red. This woman's skin was simply thick to the extreme. She locked them up and still had the nerve to say that they were guests in front of them. It was true that people who didn't belong to the same family would not enter the same family. Peng Zhishi's wife was also not a good person. Magistrate Yang still had some sense. He left silently with a sullen face. It seemed that he was in a hurry to go back and impeach Pang Shao. She didn't know how he would feel when he went back and found that the government office, the treasury, the taxes, the grain, and the magistrate's seal were all controlled by Pang Shao. A few days later, on the 10th of September, Pang Shao returned to the manor again. Qin Yining smiled and said, "Why are you back today? Why didn't you send someone to tell me in advance? I could have prepared some delicious food for you." Although they could eat their fill in the barracks, they couldn't eat well. Every time she thought of Pang Shao and the men in the army eating cornbread, black and hard steamed buns and salted vegetables, she felt distressed. Pang Shao smiled and shook his head, saying, there is something. Father-in-law sent someone to deliver the news as quickly as possible. Qin Yining's heart skipped a beat. She asked anxiously, what news? Did something happen at home? No, don't panic. Seeing her pale face, Pang Xiao hurriedly hugged her and sat her down. He explained, it's not what you think. Nothing happened at home. Everyone is fine. Father-in-law sent someone to tell me the situation in the imperial court. I see. Qin Yining let out a long sigh. After Si Qin led the Taitan army to retreat, he was ambushed by Si Qin. He was almost captured alive. The situation in the Taitan is also very tense. The common people are complaining because of the war. The time to avenge a Nari Khan has passed. The common people can only experience the pain of war. Therefore, their support for Si Qin is not as strong as before. Qin Yining's eyes lit up when she heard this. She said happily, that's great. I said that Prince Consort Ji is as famous as you and must be as powerful as you. I was right. Pang Xiao was amused by her words. He said in a light tone, Lan is indeed very powerful. If the two of us were to fight, I don't know if I would be able to defeat him. However, Lan did very well this time. Under such difficult circumstances, he was still able to drive the Taitan out of Dezhou. Si Qin could only take the initiative to ask for peace. He even took the initiative to give a Nari Khan's younger sister, Princess Tana, to your majesty as a concubine, to show that the two countries are on good terms. Chapter 756. In fact, Pang Xiao did not take Tian Jizi's evaluation to heart at all. However, he also knew that many people, including Li Qitian, took Tian Jizi's evaluation to heart. Seeing Qin Yining frowning and looking at him with disdain, he could not help but laugh out loud. All right, Sister Yi, don't be angry. It's not worth getting angry at someone like that. Father-in-law sent the letter mainly to tell us to be more careful. Although I received the court bulletin very quickly, Your Majesty sent a secret envoy to the old capital, but the court bulletin did not mention it. Qin Yining frowned and said worriedly, why would he send a secret envoy out of the blue? What does Your Majesty want to do? Father-in-law means that Your Majesty has two big worries. Since the problem in the north has been solved, then the problem in the south is left. The secret envoy must have come to the south to show Your Majesty's kindness and to cause trouble in the south. He wants us to be mentally prepared in advance. Qin Yining nodded seriously and said, my father will not speak carelessly. Since he guessed it and told us directly, then it should not be far from the truth. Fortunately, you have already made preparations. Now the army is well trained, and the soldiers' salaries are not a problem. The local disloyal soldiers are also under control. Otherwise, we will be completely unprepared. If Your Majesty really wants to do something to you, we will be attacked from the front and the back. Pang Xiao nodded and fell silent with Qin Yining. Thinking back to what they had experienced in the past few days, they felt some lingering fear. Ji Ziyu's victory came suddenly. If they had delayed a little longer and were not prepared at all, they were afraid that they would have fallen into a very difficult situation. They would have many constraints and would not be able to deal with the enemy without any repercussions. Fortunately, everything was developing in a good direction. Let's celebrate tonight and eat a good meal to celebrate the victory over the Taitan. Celebrate the victory over the Taitan. The people at the border can finally live in peace. Pang Xiao sighed and hugged Qin Yining in his arms and patted her back. The news sent by Qin Huayuan was not bad. The secret envoy sent by Your Majesty arrived at the old capital very quickly. One day, Qin Yining was sewing Zhao Gu's little clothes when a series of urgent shouts came from outside. My lady! Is it Huzi? Bing Tang stood up and looked at the door curiously. Huzi rushed down the corridor and said anxiously, Wang Fei, Your Majesty's secret envoy went to the military camp to deliver an imperial edict. He said that there is another imperial edict for you. He is coming here now. Wang Yi asked me to come back and tell you. Qin Yining put down his embroidery and asked with a frown, What order did Your Majesty give to Wang Yi? In order to celebrate the victory over the Taden, Your Majesty granted amnesty to the people. In consideration of Wang Yi's contributions in guarding the south, he rewarded him with 100 taels of gold. In addition, Your Majesty also made the Marquis of Dingwa, which will be hereditary. He also made Qi Shujie, the commandant of Southern Yan, Imperial Prince Su. Huzi took a deep breath and said slowly, The higher-ups also gave orders for Magistrate Yang to go back to the capital to report on his work. A new magistrate will be sent here. The most important thing is that Your Majesty asked you to be the wedding ambassador. In a while, the secret envoy will come to deliver the imperial edict. Wang Yi asked around, and the secret envoy was also a tactful person. He knew that you would know the contents of the imperial edict sooner or later, so he immediately told Wang Yi. Your Majesty wants you to take care of Princess Tana when she comes to Dezhou. Qin Yining pursed his lips, took 2 steps back, and sat down on the soft chair. It was obvious that Li Qitian really wanted to see the world in chaos. Look at what kind of edict he gave. He gave Ji Ziyu the title of Duke, which will be hereditary, but he only gave Pang Shao some gold and silver as a symbolic reward. Wasn't this sowing discord between the two people who were equally famous? Also, in order to stabilize the situation in the south, Li Qitian promised to recognize Southern Yan as an independent country and Yuqi Shujie as the emperor of Southern Yan. Who knew that he would go back on his words? They had clearly agreed, but now he gave the emperor of a country a title of king. Wasn't this deliberately provoking trouble? As for why Magistrate Yang was suddenly transferred, Qin Yining thought of 2 possibilities. First, Your Majesty knew about Magistrate Yang's experience and wanted to use him to impeach Pang Shao. The second possibility was more terrifying. The people the Qiu family arranged in the imperial court were so powerful that they could control the imperial court and use local officials. This time, Qiu Guang was killed and the Qiu family fell into the hands of Qiu Yuanqing. Qiu Yuanqing wanted to eliminate Qiu Feishan's people even more. If the above were difficult to deal with, the most difficult thing was that Li Qitian wanted her to receive Princess Tana. Princess Tana was Inari Khan's younger sister. Although it was not known whether they were of the same mother or not, and it was suspected that they were cousins, but according to the rumors, Inari Khan had died in her hands, and she had long been blamed for it. How could Tana not hate the enemy who killed Inari? Li Qitian wanted her, the enemy who killed her sister, to receive Princess Tana. What a coincidence! Qin Yining's mind was turning fast, and he was analyzing quickly. At this time, a maid came back and said, Wang Fei, Wang Yi is back. There is also a eunuch from the imperial court who wants to deliver the edict. Wang Yi is receiving the eunuch in the front. Wang Fei, you should prepare to receive the edict. Qin Yining nodded, I know. Huzi said, Wang Fei, you should prepare well. This subordinate will leave first. Qin Yining smiled, Bing Tang, help me send them off. Huzi smiled and winked at Bing Tang. Bing Tang's face turned red. He stomped his feet and snorted. Then he followed Huzi out. Qin Yining was amused by the pair of children. The confusion in his heart disappeared a little. Qin Yining put on makeup and went to the front yard. Pang Shao had already ordered people to prepare an incense table. Qin Yining knew the content of the imperial edict. So when he was kneeling and listening to the edict, he was a little confused. When the eunuch handed the imperial edict to Qin Yining came back to his senses and received it with both hands. This subject accepts the imperial edict. Thank you for your Majesty's grace. She lowered her head and knelt on the ground. A pair of white jade-like hands were raised above her head. The emperor trusted his subjects and entrusted them with important tasks. This was the greatest grace. It was even more so for a woman. Chief Steward Qing took 2 steps forward and placed the imperial edict in Qin Yining's hands. His hoarse and somewhat sharp voice was very gentle as he said, "Wang Fei, please rise. Your Majesty values Wang Yi and Wang Fei. This is truly Dai Fu. This is all thanks to your Majesty's benevolence." Qin Yining held the imperial edict and stood up. Chief Steward Qing smiled and said, "The imperial edict states that Princess Tana's marriage procession will arrive in the capital at the end of the year. Wang Fei, please prepare early. Time is very tight." Qin Yining smiled and nodded, "Yes. Thank you for your advice. Wang Fei is too courteous. This servant doesn't deserve it." Chief Steward Qing bowed to Qin Yining again and turned to walk towards Pang Shao. "Wang Yi, may I have a word with you?" Pang Shao naturally smiled and nodded, then followed Chief Steward Qing to the side. Chief Steward Qing lowered his voice and said, "Wang Yi, when this servant left the palace, your Majesty ordered this servant to pass on a secret edict to you." "Oh. Please speak, Gong Gong." Pang Zhao's expression was very serious. Replying to Wang Yi, "Your Majesty's verbal edict states that the north is now stable. The Yuqi faction in the south is still alive and has colluded with the old capital's henchmen. There will be endless trouble in the future. I hope that Wang Yi will use the correct method to resolve this crisis and handle it cleanly and beautifully." Pang Zhao's pupils suddenly shrank, but his expression didn't change. He nodded and said, "Your Majesty is farsighted. This servant didn't expect this. Very well, please pass on your Majesty's message. This servant will definitely not disappoint your Majesty's trust. Yes, Prince Zhongshuan is loyal and devoted. This servant will definitely pass on your message to your Majesty." Chief Steward Qing nodded. Pang Shao arranged for a guest courtyard for Chief Steward Qing to stay in temporarily. He also personally sent a very generous gift to Chief Steward Qing until he was very happy. Only then did he return to the upper room. After dismissing the servants, the husband and wife sat in front of a candle flame and didn't speak for a long time. After a long time, Qin Yining finally asked, "What did Chief Steward Qing say to you in the corner? Did your Majesty have any orders?" "Yes. Your Majesty doesn't want to keep the Yuqi yen any longer." Qin Yining had already somewhat guessed in his heart. When he heard this, he laughed mockingly. "The north has just stabilized a little, but you can't wait to deal with this matter here. It can be seen how anxious your Majesty is. If I let you deal with the Yuqi yen, won't you be the scapegoat in the end? Your Majesty must have discussed this secret edict with the officials in the imperial court when he made the decision, but he avoided my father. I'm afraid that you might have made preparations in advance. Don't be angry. Things are already like this. It's useless to be angry." Pang Shao smiled comfortingly at Qin Yining and said in a carefree manner, "In any case, I already have enough troubles. One more won't make a difference." Qin Yining was silent for a while. Pang Shao had many enemies to begin with. Li Qitian was eyeing Pang Shao covetously, and the Yuqi yen was constantly thinking of ways to stir up trouble. Pang Shao had also offended the Qiu family this time. In addition, Li Qitian issued a decree to make Yuqi Shujia a prince, which was equivalent to indirectly breaking the previous promise. The situation in the south was unstable to begin with. The Yuqi yen in the old capital had Li Qitian and the Qiu family behind them. In addition, there was the southern yen that could explode at any time. Pang Zhao's situation was really deep in a quagmire and could cause trouble at any time. However, Your Majesty's decree was for her to be the bride escort ambassador, and she had to return to the capital immediately. At such a time, she couldn't stay by his side. Qin Yining became irritated and his face flushed with anger. How could Pang Xiao not be angry? Li Qitian's series of decrees this time was tantamount to stirring up the water in the south that had just calmed down. He already had many enemies, and now Yuqi Shujie was added to the list. Qin Yining pursed his lips and said slowly after a while, also, Magistrate Yang will be transferred back to report on his work. There will definitely be a new magistrate in the old capital. I'm afraid you won't be able to keep what you previously controlled. If you can't control the taxes, what about the soldiers' pay? There were so many mouths in the army, but Li Qitian dismissed them with a self-financing. Now that so many things had happened, he still wanted Pang Xiao to think of a way to solve the soldiers' pay problem. This was simply too much. Thinking of this, Qin Yining almost cried. Pang Xiao naturally thought of this as well. It was fine that he knew the situation was tense, but there was no need to make Qin Yining anxious. Who knew that Qin Yining was so smart that she thought of everything before he could analyze it? Chapter 757. Qin Yining's eyes turned red. She felt as if grass had grown in her heart. She was so upset that she didn't know what to do. She even thought that if she had the ability, she might as well kill Li Qitian and end all troubles. But she also knew that Pang Xiao might not be willing to be a traitor for the sake of the people's stability. After all, the world had been in chaos for long enough, and the people's lives had only been stable for a few days. She understood that Pang Xiao didn't want her to worry about him. She also didn't want her irritation to affect him. The more difficult it was, the more she couldn't panic. The more dangerous it was, the more she needed to be calm. You're right. We'll deal with whatever comes our way. As long as we plan carefully, there's no obstacle that we can't overcome. Seeing that she recovered so quickly, Pang Xiao felt both proud and distressed. If she was a girl who had lived a carefree life since she was young, how could she have such a strong heart? Wasn't the reason why his sister Yi was so strong and calm because she had suffered so many hardships at a young age? He married her because he cherished her, wanted to protect her, and wanted to give her a good life. But reality often didn't go as he wished. Since she married him, she had suffered no less hardships than when she was married. She had been kidnapped, hunted down, escaped, and was almost forced to marry him. Her originally healthy body had become weak for various reasons. Even so, she had given birth to 2 sons for him. Even though she had painstakingly carried his children, his mother and grandfather still doubted her chastity. Pang Xiao's heart hurt as if it was being ruthlessly kneaded and twisted with a pair of big hands. Sister Yi. Pang Xiao walked to Qin Yining's side and opened his arms to embrace her. My sister Yi, I'm sorry. It's my fault. I'm sorry. Qin Yining was still thinking about the possible consequences of Li Qitian's imperial edicts when she was suddenly embraced by Pang Xiao. She was stunned at first, but after hearing his words, her eyes suddenly became hot. It doesn't matter. It's not your fault. How is it not my fault? If the wife suffers, it means the husband is incompetent. It's because of my incompetence that you have to live with me in fear and on edge. Pang Xiao kissed her forehead, the bridge of her nose, and the side of her cheeks. For a moment, he felt that his eyes were a little warm. Qin Yining couldn't help but laugh, but the corners of his eyes were wet. Her entire body was enveloped by his aura, and she did not have the slightest bit of resentment. All she felt was the stability and happiness of being cherished and protected. It seemed that as long as she was with this man, no matter how many things happened, no matter how many difficulties blocked her way, this man would always think of a way to support her. If even you feel that you're incompetent, is there any other man in this world who can survive? Qin Yining hugged his waist and looked up at him. His eyes were bright and gentle. No one, no matter who they are, would be able to do better than you if they were in your position. How many people are envious of you for being able to persevere until now and seize a piece of heaven and earth for yourself even under so much pressure? A temporary difficulty is nothing. Don't belittle yourself. Pang Zhao's heart was about to be warmed by her. His voice was low and hoarse. Sister E, you're so nice. You're the one who's really nice. You don't know how many people are envious of you, but I can't. Qin Yining's expression was very serious. Although the situation this time is indeed a little complicated, the side effects of Your Majesty's every decree are not difficult to analyze. We should just prepare as usual. Actually, it's not that difficult to deal with. Pang Zhao nodded and tapped the tip of her nose with his finger. Looking at you, I know you already have a plan. Yes. I have some guesses and analysis, but I'm not sure if I'm right. Pang Zhao smiled and said, It doesn't matter. You tell me first. I won't make a decision immediately. I'll discuss it with Mr. Xia and Mr. Su later. After all, this is not a success or failure of mine alone. He had relatives, family, friends, and so many loyal subordinates behind him. Not only did he have to be responsible for himself, his family, and his lover, but he also had to be responsible for these loyal subordinates and family members. That's good. Qin Yining smiled and nodded. She stretched out 3 slender fingers. The hibiscus jade ring on her ring finger shone softly under the orange light, making her skin look like it was creamy. I think there are 3 points that we need to pay attention to. What 3 points? Pang Zhao's gaze fell on her beautiful face, unable to move away. First, we need to pay attention to Yuqi Shujia's little tricks behind our backs. Yuqi Shujia and the Yuqi Yen have been in contact before. When we first came to the old capital, it was Your Majesty who forcefully drove a wedge between them and promised Yuqi Shujia that he would recognize the Southern Yen as an independent country. Only then did the two of them sever their superficial alliance. The Yuqi Yen are the Orthodox Dayan. What Yuqi Shujia needs is a proper title. He wants a high position, but he doesn't want to bear the infamy. In the past, he would rather let the Yuqi Yen do whatever they wanted in his territory than be radical. He must be a person who cares a lot about his reputation. Now, a person who cares so much about his reputation has been given the title of Imperial Prince Su by Your Majesty. He won't be willing to accept it. In addition, the Yuqi Yen have developed a certain amount of power in the local area. Yuqi Shujia is alone and can't do anything. He's also afraid of Your Majesty, so he doesn't dare to openly cause trouble in the old capital. However, he can play dirty. If I were Yuqi Shujia, I would definitely contact the Yuqi Yen. After all, they are of the same bloodline. No matter how much conflict there is, when it's time to unite against outsiders, don't you think so? My sister E is really smart. You're right. Pang Zhao looked at Qin Yining's spirited little face with admiration in his eyes. I will be careful. In fact, even if the Yuqi Yen and Yuqi Shujia cooperate, they may not be truly united. The Yuqi Yen is not the type to play politics. They rely on Gu Shixiang. No matter how sincere Gu Shixiang is, there is no knowing what a person's heart is. There are already disagreements between the master and servant. With the addition of Yuqi Shujia, their camp may not be as impregnable as His Majesty's arrangement. If they are not united, that will be my greatest advantage. You're right. But they may also come up with a sinister trick together. Maybe they will try to figure out Your Majesty's thoughts. As long as they do the same thing as Your Majesty should be able to use them and not suppress them too much. So you have to be careful. Yes, I know. Being able to analyze the current situation with Qin Yining, Pang Zhao felt that he could deal with whatever happened. What else? Also, when we were in Jianchuan City, Qiu Feishan wanted to make you her chosen supporter. Do you still remember? I remember you told me. Pang Xiao nodded. Qin Yining continued, after listening to what Qiu Feishan said about the relationship between the prominent families and the hidden families, although the hidden families are divided and not as powerful as before, in the end, a starving camel is still bigger than a horse. Now that Qiu Yuanqing is the leader, he naturally won't choose you as his supporter. I think, among the people in the world who can fight against Li Qitian, Si Qin of the Taiten is one, Prince Consort Ji is another, and the orthodox Dian Yuqi Yen can also be considered one. Si Qin is an outsider, and the Qiu family will not support outsiders, so Si Qin can be ignored. Prince Consort Ji seems to support your majesty, just like Lu Heng, so the Qiu family will not support Prince Consort Ji. The rest of the candidates are easy to guess. It is very likely that he will choose to support the Yuqi Yen. So the second thing you need to be careful of is that the Yuqi Yen and Qiu Yuanqing are colluding. Third, we don't know how much power the Qiu family has in the imperial court. They can influence the people in Jianchuan City, and the transferred magistrate Yang is Qiu Feishan's man. Who can be sure that Qiu Yuanqing will not also influence the people in the imperial court of the old capital? What if he also influences the choice of the new magistrate? Magistrate Yang's return to the capital is a bit too sudden. The timing of the new magistrate's appointment is too sensitive. So you also need to be careful of the new magistrate colluding with the Qiu family. If the new magistrate also has connections with the Qiu family, and the Qiu family also chooses the Yuqi Yen to support, then you will face several different opponents twisting into a rope. The Qiu family, the Yuqi Yen, Yuqi Shujia, and the new magistrate, they will tightly surround you in the middle and work together to obstruct you. At this point, Qin Yining felt that Pang Xiao's situation was too dangerous. In the old capital, there may be so many troubles, and in the capital, there was also Li Qitian who was covetously watching. Li Qitian was indeed a powerful person. With an imperial edict, he completely stirred up a mess of these forces, and it was possible that several of them would unite to deal with Pang Xiao. With such a scheming method, he really deserved to be on the throne. At that time, who knows how many schemes he had behind the scenes and how many guilty things he had done, so that he was so afraid of Pang Xiao. Qin Yining's mind turned at lightning speed. However, in the time it took to breathe, Pang Xiao had already put his arm around her shoulder and touched her slightly cold cheek to comfort her. This is also the worst-case scenario. Maybe the situation won't develop to this point. You are right. But according to the worst-case plan, it is better to be prepared. And I also think that with your Majesty's wisdom and means, it is very likely that he will add fuel to the fire behind the scenes, and it is very likely that things will develop like what I just said. Qin Yining stood up and paced back and forth on the ground. Her tall and slender figure was like a spinning top, anxiously spinning around the ground, and finally stopped in front of Pang Xiao. What should I do? I don't want to leave your side, I want to be with you. Pang Xiao's heart was about to melt. He put his arm around her waist and held her in his arms. I also don't want you to leave my sight. Our sister Yi only has me in her heart, but have you forgotten the situation you are in? What situation? Qin Yining was stunned and did not react for a moment. Chapter 758. Qin Yining looked up at him. Of course I feel that something is wrong. There are many women with titles in the imperial court who are more senior and experienced than me. There are also the Empress Dowager and the Empress. It's not like there are no other concubines in the palace. What's more, there are also relatives of the emperor. There's really no need for an outsider like me to rush back to welcome Princess Tana. Pang Xiao nodded worriedly. That's not all. Alan has made great contributions and obtained the hereditary title of Duke. He defeated the Taiten's commander-in-chief. In order to slap the Taiten in the face, Who do you think is more suitable to welcome the princess sent by the Titan? Qin Yining suddenly said, "Are you talking about the eldest princess? If you want to slap Si Qin and the Titan in the face, it's naturally the eldest princess. After all, the eldest princess and prince consort Ji are husband and wife. Moreover, the eldest princess has the royal bloodline, so her status is even more noble." "That's right. Li Helan is idle in the capital, but your majesty insists on making you the envoy. Perhaps he wants to transfer you away from me. He knows what my weakness is. Perhaps he wants to make a fuss about you." Pang Zhao's eyes were gloomy, as if a huge storm was brewing. The surging anger seemed to be able to overturn the roof at any time. Pang Zhao looked at Qin Yining, but a dangerous thought came to his mind. Seeing that he narrowed his eyes, as if he was calculating something and could not hide the murderous aura around him, Qin Yining held his hand and said hesitantly, "Jishi, what do you want to do?" Pang Zhao pursed his lips and shook his head. Then he smiled and said, "Nothing, I'm just a little angry about the current situation." "No, you must be hiding something from me." Qin Yining looked at Pang Zhao and recalled what he had just said. A guess suddenly came to his mind. "Don't tell me you want to take drastic measures." Pang Zhao raised his eyebrows and looked at Qin Yining with interest in his eyes. He smiled and said, "What do you mean? You want to kill Princess Tana?" Pang Zhao didn't deny it. She pulled Qin Yining's hand and sat down beside him. Then, she said in a low voice, "If Princess Tana died outside and didn't fall in the capital, then naturally, there wouldn't be a need for an ambassador. You don't have to go back to the capital." Qin Yining looked into Pang Zhao's eyes and confirmed that Pang Zhao was not joking. He knew that Pang Zhao was really worried about her safety. "Jishi, you can't be rash." Qin Yining held Pang Zhao's large hand and rubbed the hard calluses on his palm with his slender and soft fingers. "Think about it. Now that our situation is so complicated, we can't complicate things and give your majesty more reasons to target you. Killing people is easier said than done. What's more, in order to negotiate with Dezhou, Si Qin will definitely protect Princess Tana closely. It's impossible to get rid of her without alerting anyone. Once what you do is exposed in front of others, your majesty will have more reasons to kill you. Think about it. How many people will be implicated because of this situation of being attacked from the front and the back? You can't do this, right?" Pang Zhao pursed her lips and didn't speak. She was like a stubborn child. Qin Yining continued to speak softly, "None of us know what kind of person Princess Tana is. Although she was sent by Titan to be married to Dezhou, she is still alive. We shouldn't make decisions for her life before we confirm that she has committed a heinous crime and deserves it. It's not so easy to end a person's life. No one should trample on the lives of innocent people. Don't you think so?" Pang Zhao lowered her head and nodded after a moment. "Yes. I know you are worried about me, but I promise you that I will be careful and protect myself. You just have to leave the guards to me. I will take care of the rest. After returning to the capital, Father will naturally take care of me. Back in Dian, the demon empress wanted to eat my flesh, but didn't I dodge it? So this time, the situation isn't so bad. I can handle it. Trust me." Pang Zhao only held Qin Yining's hand and didn't let go. She also refused to speak. She lowered her head and felt conflicted. Qin Yining smiled and shook her hand. "Don't worry. Didn't you say that I am the smartest? Since I am smart, I can also handle this kind of situation. There won't be a problem. Besides, when I was in Titan, I didn't lose to Inari and Si Qin. I really don't care about Princess Titan. After all, this is Dezhou's land. It's not a place where she can do whatever she wants." Qin Yining persuaded Pang Xiao for a long time before she finally nodded. She sighed and said, I know that you said so much for my sake. What are you talking about? We are a family. Naturally, I am doing this for the both of us. Pang Xiao sighed softly. She stretched out her arms and hugged Qin Yining again. She sat on her lap and buried her face in her neck. Sister Yi, I don't want to be separated from you. Once you go back, I don't know when I will receive the imperial decree to return to the capital. Qin Yining was also very sad in her heart. In their family of 4, one was going to the capital, the other was in the old capital, and brother Zhao and brother Han were going to Nanyan. Even when the 2 children were by her side, Pang Xiao was always not at home because he was busy with military affairs. They had never lived the kind of ordinary life that ordinary people had, where they knew each other and stayed together. Don't think so much. When you solve the matter here, you will naturally return to the capital. Besides, there is nothing wrong with the way things are now. After I return to the capital, I can take care of old madam and old master. I can also fulfill my filial piety in front of the elders. This is quite good. What he cherished most about her was that she always hid her sadness well and never showed it. She always showed her best and strongest side in front of him. She was always so sensible, not arrogant and willful, and never caused trouble for him. However, Pang Xiao hoped that she could be spoiled by him. No matter how strong she was just a weak woman. Pang Xiao hugged Qin Yining and cherished her lips. Take good care of yourself. Don't let yourself be wronged and don't let yourself get hurt. I know. You too. You have to share weal and woe with the soldiers in the army. When you go back, remember to give yourself special treatment. We won't treat ourselves badly, right? When Pang Xiao heard this, he chuckled and said, I know. I will definitely eat and drink well. Also, if there is anything, discuss it with Sir Xia and Sir Su. In addition, Your Majesty's secret decree asked you to kill the Yuchi Yen. You have to think carefully about what to do. If you really kill him, Your Majesty will expose the matter later. Who will speak up for you? At that time, most people in the world won't know that you were actually acting on Your Majesty's secret decree. They will only think that you killed the last emperor of the Dayan. I'm afraid the impact will be huge. Okay, I will listen to our sister Yi. Pang Xiao nodded obediently. If an outsider saw this, their jaws would definitely drop. Because at this time, he didn't look domineering and fierce at all. He looked like a gentle and loyal dog. The 2 of them told each other what they could think of. They were afraid that if they separated, they would miss something. That night, none of them slept well. Because they were returning to the capital by imperial decree, there was a time limit. Before dawn the next day, Pang Xiao called his subordinate, Jinghu Wei, to a place and arranged for people to escort Qin Yining back to the capital. Pang Xiao selected the people who escorted Qin Yining to Jianchuan City last time. They followed Qin Yining without any problems. Moreover, they had some friendship with the silver-masked spy, so it would be more convenient for them to do things. Wang Fei's safety will depend on everyone. Pang Xiao explained the details and finally cupped his hands in salute. Several Jinghu Wei hurriedly avoided Pang Xiao's salute. They returned the salute and said, Wang Yi, don't worry. We will protect Wang Fei with our lives. In the bedroom, Qin Yining folded the clothes he made for Pang Xiao. He put them in a dark blue cloth bag and handed it to Huzi. He told him, take good care of Wang Yi. Although the south is not as cold as the north, it is still very wet and cold. Take these clothes to the military camp. Remember to let him wear them. Yes, I will remember. Huzi hugged the cloth bag and felt a little sad. He looked at Bing Tang who was packing the luggage. He suddenly understood Pang Xiao's current feelings. Bing Tang and Ji Yun had already finished packing the luggage. Wang Fei, everything is packed. Chief Steward Qing has already prepared the carriage. Just now, someone came to ask if Princess Consort is ready. Qin Yining came back to his senses. He took the lotus petal cloud from Bing Tang and put it on. He smiled and said, I am ready. Let's go. Yes. Everyone followed Qin Yining out of the door. When they reached the entrance of the courtyard, Qin Yining looked back at the door and plaque of Snow Pear Courtyard. This huge courtyard was where her maiden family lived. Although her maiden family was not at home now, many of her memories of leaving the mountains and returning to the city were gathered here. Once she left, she did not know when she would come back again. Qin Yining suppressed the bitterness in his heart and smiled as he led the people to the main door. Pang Xiao had already exchanged greetings with Chief Qing at the door for a long time. Chief Qing was a transparent person. He was already afraid of Pang Xiao. In addition, Pang Xiao had given him a generous reward. Qin Yining was of noble status and had even become Your Majesty's personal envoy. He did not dare to slight him at all. When he saw Qin Yining come out, he quickly went forward and bowed. This servant pays respects to Wang Fei. Qin Yining quickly moved to the side and returned the greeting. Chief Qing, please don't be so polite. I will have to rely on Chief Qing to take care of me on this journey. Don't mention it. It is this servant's duty to serve Wang Fei. Wang Fei, please don't be so polite. After exchanging greetings, Qin Yining's gaze landed on Pang Xiao. They did not sleep well last night. Today, both of them had faint dark circles under their eyes. Pang Xiao smiled at Qin Yining, don't worry. When you return to the capital, just focus on sharing Your Majesty's worries. I will complete Your Majesty's orders as soon as possible and return to the capital. Chapter 759. With one hand behind his back, Pang Xiao straightened his back and extended an arm to support him. The two acted out the mutual respect perfectly. But in their hearts, they both wanted to hug each other right now. Qin Yining sat in the carriage. Pang Xiao also mounted his horse and led his men to follow behind. This king is also going back to the barracks. I'll send you off. Pang Xiao said he would send them off, but he sent Qin Yining and the secret envoy back to the capital more than 100 li away from the old capital. This was the opposite direction from the barracks. If they continued to walk, they would be too far away from the barracks. Urging his horse to walk beside Qin Yining's carriage, Pang Xiao said with a smile, go home and be at ease. Wait for me to return to the capital. Pang Xiao was dressed in black. His face was as white as jade and his eyes were like dots of lacquer. Under the morning light, he was so handsome that he didn't seem like a mortal. Qin Yining lifted the curtain and smiled at him with his head tilted. I know. Don't worry. Pang Xiao looked deeply at Qin Yining. His eyes were filled with love, reluctance, and even more helplessness. His large hand touched Qin Yining's slightly cold face. Pang Xiao instructed Ji Yun and the others in the carriage, take good care of Wang Fei. The weather is getting colder. The further north we go, the colder it gets. Make sure Wang Fei is well dressed. Don't catch a cold. Yes, Wang Yi, don't worry. Ji Yun, Bing Tang, and the others all smiled and agreed. Their voices were very pleasant to the ears. Pang Xiao didn't have any reason to stay any longer. He spurred his horse to bid farewell to Qing Zongguan. Then, he took a dozen of his men and spurred their horses to gallop along the official road in the direction of the military camp. Qin Yining sat upright in the carriage, feeling lost. They had just separated, but she was already missing him. The journey back to the capital was very smooth. Qin Yining was accompanied by a silver-masked secret agent and his personal maidservant. In addition, there were 6 Jinghu Wei guards arranged by Pang Xiao to surround the carriage. Their safety was guaranteed. Occasionally, they encountered some brave men, but they were beaten and fled. After General Manager Qing received benefits from Pang Xiao, he was very polite to Qin Yining. Qin Yining was not a domineering person, so he was also very polite to General Manager Qing. Gradually, the two of them became more familiar with each other and maintained a mutual respect for each other. However, with Your Majesty's decree, they didn't dare to delay on the road. They still had to eat and sleep in the open as they hurried to the capital. Although Qin Yining said that she was going to be the wedding ambassador, she wasn't a proper lady after all. She learned the rules from the retired old nannies of the Yan dynasty when she was in the Dian imperial court. The rules and etiquette of the Yan dynasty were naturally different from those of Dezhou. The etiquette that Dezhou followed was also learned from Beiji, so it couldn't be considered true ancient etiquette. After all, Dezhou had only been established for 6 years. Including the Empress, Empress Dowager, and Princess Royal, they could at most be considered landladies. Compared to the well-educated ladies of the royal family, their etiquette was unbearable. This time, after defeating the Taitan, Dezhou wanted to show the power of the country. They also wanted to show outsiders the ancient etiquette and elegance of Dezhou. Naturally, they wouldn't be careless. General Manager Qing smiled and said, "So after the Wang Fei returns to the capital, she should first learn the ancient etiquette while waiting for Princess Tana." Qin Yining nodded and said, "That's right." The Taitan occupied the north. Since the Beiji era, the border has been closed every year. The common people have suffered greatly. Now that Dezhou's army has finally defeated the Taitan, the common people are at peace. We can't do anything to the main culprits who have surrendered, but it is essential to show them the etiquette and elegance of Dezhou. This is also a way to show the power of the country. Yes, Wang Fei is right. General Manager Qing nodded repeatedly and admired Qin Yining in his heart. Qin Yining's thinking and bearing were indeed the pillow of Prince Zhongshuan. Her words were watertight. Wang Fei is indeed an intelligent person. Your Majesty's eyes are as sharp as torches. This servant really admires you. Her words flattered both Qin Yining and Li Qitian. Qin Yining and Chief Steward Qing traveled together, so she had figured out this person's character. A eunuch who could sit in his position was definitely not someone who acted impulsively. He was most particular about being tactful and didn't offend anyone. He always left a way out. Perhaps in the future, he would be able to create good karma for himself. Qin Yining sometimes couldn't help but think that perhaps she should learn from General Manager Qing how to conduct herself. Because sometimes, she felt that ever since she married Pang Xiao, she had someone to rely on. It seemed that she didn't know how to be tactful and flexible. Her temper also became more irritable. This wasn't good. It was easy to get into trouble. The journey back to the capital was long. The closer they got to the capital, the colder the weather became. Qin Yining brought a thick sweater with her when she left the capital. She also often held an exquisite hand warmer in her hands. Even so, Qin Yining often felt cold. Wang Fei's body is damaged after giving birth. That's why she's afraid of the cold. After we return to the capital and settle down, I still have to take good care of Wang Fei's health. Don't think that you don't care just because you're fine. Why don't you think about how old you are now? Bing Tang placed an exquisite hand warmer next to Qin Yining's feet as she nagged. Qin Yining laughed and said, "Bing Tang is so caring. I can't even bear to give you to that blockhead Huzi. Why is Wang Fei like this? I'm concerned about you out of the kindness of my heart, but you turn around and make fun of me." Bing Tang's face was as red as a cooked shrimp. She lowered her head and didn't look into Qin Yining's eyes. Ji Yun, Xian Yun, Qiu Lu, and Lian Xiaozhou at the side couldn't help but laugh. Everyone talked at once and made fun of Bing Tang. Qin Yining gently pinched Ji Yun's and Xian Yun's cheeks and said with a smile, "Don't just focus on making fun of Bing Tang. You're not young anymore. When we return, I'll be careful and find you a good family. I won't let you cast pearls before swine." Is Wang Fei crazy? Why did you think of matchmaking today? Xian Yun's face was even redder than Bing Tang's. She said angrily, "If we leave, who will serve you?" Qiao Lu also said, "I won't leave Wang Fei's side." Qin Yining smiled and said, "Idiot, you can all come back to my side in the future and be my wife. How can you not marry for the rest of your life? Find a reliable Ru-Yi husband and live happily with each other in the future. Just like Wang Yi and I, we can support each other. Isn't that good? Also, Wang Yi and I can be your support. I don't believe that there will be anyone who won't open their eyes and dare to neglect you in the future." The women's faces turned red from Qin Yining's words, but they were all very moved. They all knew that Qin Yining was sincerely planning for their happiness. As time passed, the closer they got to the capital, the closer it got to winter. The snow this year was especially heavy. Although they were returning to the capital by imperial decree and were very nervous on the road, they were still delayed by the heavy snow. As a result, when the group returned to the capital and arrived at Dexing town, which was half a day's journey away from the capital, it was already the afternoon of the 3rd day of the 11th month. Chief Steward Qing was wearing thick woolen collar clothes. He crossed his arms and stepped through the snow, squeaking as he walked to Qin Yining's carriage. He smiled and said, "Wang Fei." Qin Yining heard the noise and quickly pushed open the window. He smiled and said, "Chief Steward Qing. Wang Fei, now that we've arrived at Dexing town, we'll stay here for the night and tidy up a bit. Tomorrow, we can directly enter the city. Chief Steward Qing is very thoughtful. We'll do as you say." Qin Yining nodded. "Yes." Chief Steward Qing cupped his hands and ordered the group to head towards Dexing town. The town wasn't very big. One could see the end of the main street at a glance. The only inn in the town didn't have any courtyards. There were only single rooms on the 2nd floor. The group of people was arranged to stay in the inn. Some of the accompanying imperial bodyguards had to go down and squeeze into a bunk. But when they thought that they could enter the city tomorrow and that the arduous journey was finally over, everyone was in a good mood. After Qin Yining took a bath, he prepared the clothes he would wear the next day in advance. He sat in front of the lamp with his half-dried hair draped over his shoulders and sewed. The servant girls were already very tired. Qin Yining sent them to rest quickly. "We still have to wake up early tomorrow. After we enter the city, there are still a lot of things to do. We have to rest well." The people at Bing Tang were so tired that they couldn't open their eyes. Hearing this, they didn't refuse and went to sleep. Qin Yining only left Xiao Lu to sew the night in the outer room. Qin Yining sewed the outer robe in her hand stitch by stitch. This was the spring clothing she had made for Pang Xiao. She had planned for him to wear it over the new year. She wasn't good at embroidering complicated patterns. She had planned to let an embroiderer do it in the future. She could only make ready-made clothing. In any case, Pang Xiao wouldn't mind if her stitches were too thick. She just had to be careful not to drop the needle into the clothes and prick him. Every day, she could only let her thoughts run wild when she was sewing clothes for him under the lamp. In front of others, she didn't want to reveal her emotions, especially when there were so many people around her. She couldn't let her negative emotions affect others. She didn't know how the situation was in the old capital. She was with Chief Steward Qing, so she had to be careful when contacting Pang Xiao. She was afraid that she would leave behind something that could be used against her. She was also afraid that there would be spies among the people around Chief Steward Qing who would specifically pass on information to Li Qiqian. Qin Yining sighed softly. She blinked her sore eyes and slowly tidied up her needlework. She also planned to go to bed. At this moment, a soft voice suddenly came from the back window. Wang Fei. It was Jing Jie. Qin Yining hurriedly grabbed a piece of clothing and put it on. She walked to the window and whispered through a layer of paper, "What's wrong?" "Zhou Niba wants to see you." "Lu Heng." Qin Yining thought for a moment and whispered, "Where is he?" "He's downstairs." Qin Yining thought for a moment. Her room was not far from Chief Steward Chang's room. The floor of the inn had not been repaired for a long time, so it would creak when one walked on it. If someone came in through the front door, they would definitely be discovered. However, after learning about the secret between the Chiu family and the Lu family about the hidden and prominent families, Qin Yining really wanted to see Lu Heng and find out what he was thinking. She just didn't know if Lu Heng had someone following him this time. Qin Yining fell into deep thought. Jing Jie, who was outside the window, didn't rush her and waited patiently. He squatted by the window and held the window frame with one hand. His figure was reflected on the paper window, as if he had turned into a stone statue. After a moment, Qin Yining made a decision. Think of a way to not alarm others. Ask Zhou Niba to come up. Chapter 760. The silver-masked secret agents used to do dirty and tiring work, so what kind of world had they not seen before? It wasn't difficult for them to bring someone in without alerting anyone else. Qin Yining had already put on his usual honey-colored robe and went to the outer room to wake Chiu Lu up in case someone came in and woke her up. It would be bad if she screamed out loud. Chiu Lu had an ashamed expression on her face. She took out a hairband and carefully tied Qin Yining's half-dry hair into a loose bun. She then took out a white fox fur coat and draped it over her shoulders. It's all this servant's fault. This servant should have been the one to go to bed, but this servant was so asleep that I didn't even know what happened. It's really my fault. Chiu Lu lowered her voice and hurriedly apologized, but she was also afraid that Chief Steward Chang's men would overhear her. What are you saying? Don't think too much about it. Qin Yining patted the back of Chiu Lu's hand. Jing Jie secretly told me. Think about his status. If he deliberately didn't want anyone to find out, but you found out, wouldn't he be hurt? Chiu Lu couldn't help but smile when she heard this. She felt a bit better. Qin Yining had always treated people like them with leniency and never fussed over small matters. However, the more lenient their master was, the more they shouldn't neglect him. Chiu Lu inwardly made up her mind. She handed over a hand warmer that was just right for him and chose an inconspicuous corner to stand in. At this moment, there was a rustling sound outside the window. Chiu Lu hurriedly went to open the window. Jing Jie brought Lu Heng inside. They landed soundlessly. Jing Jie turned around to close the window. He was careful not to make the slightest sound. He immediately hid in the corner and didn't plan on leaving. It was obvious that he was afraid that the two weak women in the room would be in danger. Lu Heng shook off the snow on his rat fur cloak and looked up at Qin Yining with a smile. Under the warm orange light, half of Qin Yining's palm-sized face was hidden in the white fox fur collar. Her skin was as lustrous as jade, and her long hair hung softly behind her back, loosely tied up with a hairband. Her slender and fair hands were holding a small, delicate heater the size of an apple. She just stood there without saying a word, like a painting, which made people's hearts melt. Lu Heng's smile deepened. He lowered his voice and said, "Long time no see." Qin Yining also laughed softly and said, "Long time no see. Second Master Lu seems to be doing well." Hearing that she didn't call him Zhongyibo, but called him Second Master Lu like how she did in the desert, Lu Heng felt warmth spread from his heart to his fingertips. Even the blood flowing through his veins was heating up. Originally, he had some hesitation and regret when he came in the middle of the night, but now he didn't have the slightest bit of regret. I'm still the same. You look pretty good too. I heard that you have 2 sons now. Yes. When she left the capital, she was pregnant. Now, the 2 babies were almost 1 year old. Qin Yining's smile became even gentler. He reached out his hand and invited her, let's sit down and talk. Okay. Qin Yining and Lu Heng went inside and sat down. Jing Zhi turned off the lights to the dimmest and covered the windows with curtains to prevent people outside from seeing the shadows in the room. Qin Yining and Lu Heng lowered their voices and talked with ease. I heard that you and Wang Ye's life in the south wasn't very smooth. It was okay. I just took care of the children. I didn't need to do anything. Wang Yi took care of the important matters. Qin Yining avoided the important matters. Lu Heng knew that she wouldn't tell him about the things around Pang Xiao, so he tactfully avoided the topic and straightforwardly stated the purpose of his visit. When I heard that you were about to return to the capital as the wedding ambassador, I arranged for people to keep an eye on the news of your return. Qin Yining nodded. I asked around. Princess Tana, who came for the political marriage this time, is Nari Khan's biological sister. Although she is born of a concubine, she has a good relationship with Nari Khan. She has always been very dependent on her sister. When Nari Khan passed away, Princess Tana cried until her eyes were almost blind. I'm worried that you will be killed if you become the wedding ambassador. Qin Yining smiled bitterly, how could I not know the danger? But your Majesty's decree is as such. I have no other choice but to accept the decree. Fortunately, this is the capital of Dezhou, not Taitan. Princess Tana came for the political marriage. She should also prioritize peace, right? I don't think she will do anything to me. Lu Heng shook his head. If she really wants to harm someone, there are many ways. You are too naive. The methods of the women in the palace are more vicious than the men. Tana is not so easy to deal with. Thank you very much. Qin Yining's eyes curved with a smile. I got it. I'll be careful. She never wanted to let down the sincere concern of others. Pang Xiao and Lu Heng's positions were becoming more and more different, but after all, they were friends who had gone through thick and thin together. Lu Heng felt as if he had been patted by the soft paw of a cat, which made him want to hold the kitten and spoil her. In his eyes, Qin Yining was a beautiful and delicate kitten. Lu Heng's eyes became particularly soft, and his low voice became more gentle. I will help you think of a way. Qin Yining felt that the atmosphere was thick and ambiguous. She was vigilant and nodded uncomfortably, her smile fading a little. Thank you for your kindness, but there is no need. There is no need for you to get involved in this muddy water because of me. Your situation is not easy. She was naturally talking about the Chiu family. Seeing that Qin Yining seemed to be vigilant, Lu Heng's affection for her increased. She was in danger, but she was still loyal to her husband. She didn't need to use the charming methods of many women to achieve her goals. He always knew that her character was excellent. After all, many women flocked to him when they saw him because he was the head of the Lu family, Your Majesty's favorite, and also had the title of Zhongyiba. He had a promising future. But Qin Yining had never been like this. It seemed that no matter how much fame he had, in her eyes, he was just him. The more loyal Qin Yining was to Pang Xiao and was unmoved by his goodwill, the more difficult it was for him to give up and the more he liked her. What's more, she also cared about him and knew that he was in a tense situation. You and I are friends in adversity. In Dezhou's territory, there are still many things that I can do. You don't need to be polite with me. As for my matters, how can the other families not suppress and envy the Lu family? I am already used to it. Lu Heng smiled bitterly. Qin Yining was also speechless for a while. When she had first come to the capital with her father, even a girl from a side branch of the Lu family could be so domineering. In addition, the Lu family had once provided Li Qitian with a large sum of money and had a close relationship with the imperial family. For her, that little girl was like a mountain that was difficult to shake. Step by step, the Lu family was still so large. If she didn't know that there was the Chiu family behind them, as well as a hidden family trying to get close to the court, she might have thought that the Lu family really was the head of all the large families. Did Lu Heng know about the hidden and prominent families? Was it only the Chiu family that passed down the family teachings, or did the Lu family also have them? Questions circled around in her mind, but she couldn't ask them without knowing the situation. Qin Yining could only try to ask, is the situation in the court different from before? Lu Heng liked Qin Yining a lot. Moreover, there wasn't anyone who could talk to him about these things. He naturally nodded and said, "It is indeed different. Let me say something that you might not like to hear. In the past, the most influential person in the court was Prince Zhongshuan. Among the civil officials, Your Majesty trusted your father the most. But now the situation is very different. This is understandable. Now the most favored person should be Prince Consort Ji." Qin Yining deliberately didn't comment on the civil officials. Yes. Lu Heng nodded and said with emotion, Prince Consort Ji insisted on saving the Titan at Mount Chongshan, which was a meritorious service. In addition, Prince Consort Ji defeated the Titan and made Your Majesty bow down to him, which solved a big problem for Your Majesty. He is also a relative of the imperial family, so naturally he is the most trusted by Your Majesty. As for the status of the Lu family, it is also different from before. Lu Heng took the initiative to talk about his own affairs. Perhaps the Lu family has been in the limelight for too many years, so a tall tree attracts the wind. Many old officials in Beiji don't like the Lu family now, and even those who are on good terms with the Lu family will be excluded. You also know how to use people. For example, if you can't always protect the people around you, they will also have opinions. Qin Yining nodded, and then Lu Heng sighed softly. In her heart, she was shocked by the information revealed in Lu Heng's words. Originally, the two sides didn't interfere with each other, but now one side suddenly targeted the Lu family. It was obvious that someone was behind this. Combined with what she knew, the Chiu family was very likely to be involved with the old officials in Beiji. And Lu Heng didn't seem to know about the Chiu family's existence. He seemed to attribute all the crux of the problem to the conflict between the aristocratic family and the old officials. This was very scary. The Lu family was an aristocratic family with more than 100 years of history. It had enormous power and complicated relationships, so it couldn't be weak. However, such a family with such a deep foundation, after showing signs of falling out with the old officials in Beiji, didn't know that the Empress Mother had other people behind this. Qin Yining wanted to ask Lu Heng if he knew about the relationship between the reclusive and prominent families, but she couldn't ask about this. She couldn't help but guess. Could it be that only the reclusive family knew about the alternation between the prominent and reclusive families, and the prominent family didn't know about it? Qin Yining's eyes showed that she was deep in thought. In Lu Heng's eyes, she looked like she was worried about him. Thinking about it, even if she didn't have any romantic feelings for him, she really cared about him and treated him as a friend. Lu Heng felt like he was soaking in a hot spring, and his whole body felt warm and comfortable in the winter. If it weren't for his rationality, he would have gone up to Qin Yining and hugged her. At this moment, a series of knocks on the door suddenly rang out. In the silence of the night, the few people who had their own thoughts were all startled. Qin Yining suddenly stood up and looked at the door cautiously. Then she immediately took off her cloak, rolled over, and covered herself with the quilt. Jingzhe also jumped and hid in the shadow of the cabinet. Lu Heng's face darkened slightly. He clenched his fists and his whole body tensed up. He tiptoed behind the curtain in the corner. Chapter 761. Everyone held their breaths and listened attentively. The person speaking outside the door was a young child. His voice was not loud, as if he was afraid of disturbing the master. "Older sister, do you have an older sister here who knows how to treat illnesses? Chief Steward Ching has a high fever. It's already so late, there's really nothing we can do." Qin Yining recognized that this was the young eunuch who had always been by Chief Steward Cheng's side. She was young, about 8 or 9 years old. Qiu Lu turned around to look at Qin Yining. Qin Yining thought for a moment, then nodded and made a hand gesture. Qiu Lu said in a low voice, "There is a Bing Tang girl, but she's not the one doing the night shift. She's next door. Be quiet, the Wang Fei is already asleep. If we disturb the Wang Fei's rest, none of us will have a good time." Yes, thank you, older sister." The young eunuch outside the door looked like she was about to cry and quickly and gently pushed the door open. A moment later, there was a light knock on the door next door. Jingzhe walked to the window and lifted the curtain. He pushed open the window and looked outside. He saw that the snow was heavier than when they stayed at the hotel. The faint footprints outside the window were mostly covered. He asked in a low voice, "Wang Fei, it's snowing heavily outside." Qin Yining immediately understood Jingzhe's meaning. The snow was heavy, so it was naturally easier to cover their tracks. Qin Yining sat on the edge of the bed and looked inquiringly at Lu Heng. She had been in a hurry to hide, so her long hair was slightly messy. Although her clothes were neat, the way she hugged the quilt still made Lu Heng's heart sway and he had some wild thoughts. He hurriedly collected his thoughts, walked to the bedside, and bent down to get closer to Qin Yining. He said in a low voice, "Don't worry. Although the marriage is inevitable, and you've already received the imperial edict, so you must be the bridal envoy, I can still make some moves. I heard that your majesty wants to use this opportunity to show off our country's etiquette. After you return to the capital, your majesty will probably assign a teacher to you to learn ancient etiquette. During the reception process, your majesty will also arrange for some palace servants to accompany you. I will arrange for people to receive you. I have already arranged for these people. You can trust them. When the time comes, they will take the initiative to meet you." After saying this, Lu Heng gave Qin Yining a reassuring smile. He straightened up and walked to the window, motioning for Jingzhe to take him away. Jingzhe looked at Lu Heng with an unfriendly gaze. He could see clearly what Lu Heng was up to. He was very disdainful of Lu Heng's intention to steal someone else's woman. Qin Yining got off the bed and said in a low voice, "I appreciate your kindness, but this kind of thing can be big or small, so I can't trouble you. You'd better not make any arrangements." Lu Heng frowned slightly and turned to look at Qin Yining. His eyes were filled with disappointment. He knew that with Qin Yining's intelligence, no matter how slow she was when it came to relationships, she would definitely be able to tell what he meant. Qin Yining was a righteous person. His feelings for Pang Xiao drove him crazy with jealousy. If she was convinced of this, she would probably never give him a chance to get close to her again. Lu Heng smiled and said politely and with restraint, "Friends are just helping each other out. Who knows, I might need your help in the future. When the time comes, I hope that you won't refuse me if it's within your power." Without waiting for Qin Yining to speak, Lu Heng motioned for Jingzhe to take him out. Jingzhe couldn't wait for him to leave, so he didn't think too much about it. He quietly opened the window and led Qin Yining out. Qin Yining frowned and chased after him. He felt that it wouldn't be good if they didn't talk things out. However, the other party didn't even give him a chance to speak. If he did, it would seem like he was overthinking things. With this in mind, Qin Yining could only give up for the time being. He thought that if there was a chance in the future, they would talk things out. After Jingzhe sent Lu Heng away, he didn't return. Qiu Lu helped Qin Yining undress and made the bed for him. Her brows were furrowed. Princess consort, that Princess Tana is really difficult to deal with. You must be careful. After hearing Lu Heng's words and thinking about the death of the Khan of Anari, Qiu Lu broke out in a cold sweat for Qin Yining. Unfortunately, she was just a servant girl with no ability. Although she wanted to, she couldn't do anything. Qin Yining laughed. It seemed that Lu Heng's words had scared this servant girl. Don't worry, I know. When we return to the Fu, you still have to tie me up to take care of the property. You also have to restrain those naughty servant girls in the courtyard. If I go to learn the rules, you have to be observant and alert. Help me keep an eye on things. Also, in a few days, Master Zhong will return to the capital. At that time, he might send a pile of account books. You have to help me keep an eye on them. Yes, Princess Consort, don't worry. I will definitely take care of these things. Qiu Lu nodded heavily. She was steady in her work and was one of the first servants to follow Qin Yining. She was like Qin Yining's lock. Whatever was placed in Qiu Lu's care, she would keep it in check. After hearing Qin Yining's words, Qiu Lu immediately smiled. She felt that she was still somewhat useful. She wasn't completely a burden to her master. Qiu Lu sat down on the footstool and asked in a low voice, "Just now, that little attendant came to ask about Bing Tang. I don't know if Chief Steward Qing discovered something, or if it was just a coincidence." Qin Yining looked pensive. "I can't be sure. If it wasn't a coincidence, then he might have discovered something and deliberately ordered someone to warn me. But it doesn't matter. Even if he heard the commotion, he wouldn't know what exactly happened. Who didn't have a few secrets with their status? It was fine if no one heard the exact content of their conversation." Qiu Lu saw that Qin Yining was so calm and didn't dwell on it any longer. She smiled and said, "Princess Consort should sleep. It's already late." Qin Yining nodded his head. Originally, he couldn't fall asleep because he missed Pang Xiao and his two children. After tossing and turning, he really did feel sleepy. The next morning, the heavy snow still hadn't stopped. Ji Yun and Xian Yun went to the inn's kitchen to bring back the food boxes. Lian Xiaozhou and Qiu Lu helped Qin Yining dress up in the room. Last night, Bing Tang Jijie was called over in the middle of the night. Chief Steward Qing had a high fever. Bing Tang Jijie only came back to sleep for a short while. She woke up early and left again. Lian Xiaozhou complained. Because of that Chief Steward Qing, she didn't have a good night's rest in Bing Tang. Lian Xiaozhou could speak very well now. It was all thanks to Bing Tang Jijie who taught her patiently. He even taught her how to identify medicinal herbs and how to treat patients. He said that it was good for a girl to have more skills. She knew that whether it was Qin Yining or Bing Tang Jijie, they were all sincerely good to her. She also sincerely wanted what was best for them. Qin Yining smiled at Lian Xiaozhou from the mirror and said, "It's okay. We can go home after we enter the city today. There are many doctors in the city. They can all treat Chief Steward Qing. When the time comes, Bing Tang Jijie can go back and have a good rest." "Okay." Lian Xiaozhou nodded heavily. She obediently opened the drawer of her makeup box and asked Qin Yining what kind of hair accessories to wear. After she finished dressing up and eating breakfast, Bing Tang Jijie came back from Chief Steward Cheng's place. Qin Yining smiled and asked, "How is Chief Steward Qing?" "His fever has gone down. Bing Tang sat down tiredly next to Qin Yining and sighed with emotion. It's not easy to be a palace maid. You have to avoid being sick. Director Qing caught a cold on the way, but because you were in a hurry, you didn't have a good rest. The closer you come to the north, the colder the weather is, and the worse your condition is. Last night, you had a high fever and couldn't find a doctor. You were afraid that you would be delayed and go back to report. When Qin Yining heard this, he was slightly relieved. It seemed that last night was really a coincidence. Not long after, the courtyard of the inn became lively. The attendants began to prepare the carriages. Chief Steward Qing personally came to knock on the door. Princess Consort, we can set off now. Qin Yining heard that Chief Steward Cheng's voice was still very hoarse. He said with concern, Chief Steward, you have to take care of your body. After you get on the carriage, take some medicine and sleep. We are already very close to the capital. Chief Steward Qing smiled and nodded. He said gratefully, thank you for your concern, Princess Consort. Chief Steward Qing did his best for your majesty. It's really touching. Chief Steward Qing shook his head repeatedly and said in fear and trepidation, this servant is not worthy of Princess Consort's praise. This servant is just doing his best to do his job. As he spoke, an attendant came in to report that the carriages were ready. The group of people left the inn and boarded the carriages separately. The long procession meandered along the white official road. As far as the eye could see, it was a vast expanse of whiteness. The snowflakes were blown by the northern wind. Jinghu Wei and the secret agents, who were riding on the horses, could feel that their skin was about to be cut by knives. Qin Yining and the others squeezed into the carriage. They could feel the cold wind seeping in through the gaps between the carriage door and the bed. The soles of their feet were so cold that they were about to cramp. Why is it so cold this winter? It seems to be colder than last year. Ji Yun rubbed her hands. Bing Tang shrunk his neck and hugged the hand warmer. He shook his head and said, luckily, the situation in the capital is still stable. It's not like the old capital where there are so many refugees. If the old capital had such weather, I'm afraid many people would have frozen to death. Qin Yining nodded. Actually, at this time, she still felt a little emotional. Although Li Qitian's character was not good, he opened up new territory and established Dezhou. He gave the people of Dezhou a relatively stable life. This was also the reason why Pang Xiao did not want to see a war break out. To the common people, it made no difference to them who was the emperor. The most important thing was whoever could bring them a stable life and prevent them from living in constant fear of losing their lives. That was why Pang Xiao did not want to break this balance and let the common people suffer an undeserved disaster. She thought of Pang Xiao again. Qin Yining sighed softly and closed his eyes to rest. He did not feel anything when they were together all day long. Once they were apart, his heart felt like it was being pulled far away by a silk thread. It did not hurt, but he could not find a place to settle down. Because of the heavy snow, the road was difficult to travel on. When the group arrived at the city gate, it was already 5:00 in the afternoon. Before they could get close to the city gate, Jingzhe's voice came from outside the carriage. Wang Fei, it seems to be master in front. Qin Yining was stunned when she heard this. She pushed open the carriage door. Through the thick curtain of snow, she saw two blue carriages parked in the distance. Qin Huayuan was wearing a black fur coat and a fur hat of the same color. He was standing beside the carriage and looking into the distance. The black fur coat was covered in snow. He was almost a snowman. Stop the carriage. Chapter 762. Father. Qin Yining walked quickly. Her snow-white fox fur coat spread out behind her, and the hairpin on her head swayed. She was as light and cheerful as a swallow flying into the forest. Qin Huaiyuan couldn't help but laugh. He walked a few steps forward to welcome her. Slow down, slow down. You're already a mother, but you're still acting like a child. Qin Yining smiled. She didn't even notice that her front teeth were cold. She panted slightly, and a white mist appeared in front of her. Father. When she got close, she froze in place. She wanted to reach out and hug him, but she couldn't because of etiquette. Qin Yining lifted her skirt and knelt on the ground to greet him. Get up, get up. Qin Huaiyuan hurriedly helped her up. He used his sleeve to wipe off the snow on Qin Yining's forehead. What are you doing? We're father and son. There's no need for such formalities. As he spoke, he also helped Qin Yining brush off the snow on his shoulders. He didn't even notice that there was a layer of frost on his beard. You've lost weight in the past year. However, I see that you're in good spirits. I know that Jishi didn't mistreat you, so I'm relieved. Everything that I wrote in my letter is true. I won't lie to you. Although it's chaotic outside, Wang Yi is there to support me. I didn't suffer any losses. That's good. I saw him as a responsible man back then. Did my 2 grandsons follow your mother to the south? Yes, they went to the south to visit my grandmother. Wang Yi arranged for people to protect them along the way. Auntie Chow also brought people to escort them. Father, you don't have to worry. Yes, of course I don't have to worry. I'm not worried about you. You just wanted to see your grandsons. Are you a little disappointed that you didn't see them? Qin Huaiyuan was amused and laughed loudly. He tapped Qin Yining's forehead. You naughty girl. Qin Yining also laughed. She had been depressed along the way, but after seeing Qin Huaiyuan, all of it dissipated. At this moment, Chief Steward Qing led people to the front and bowed. Greetings, Lord Qin. Qin Huaiyuan smiled and returned the greeting. Manager Qing doesn't need to be so courteous. This official is very grateful for Manager Chang's care along the way. Lord Qin, this servant doesn't deserve this. Chief Steward Qing hurriedly turned his body sideways to avoid Qin Huaiyuan's greeting. He turned around and bowed to Qin Huaiyuan. Thank you, Princess Consort, for taking care of this servant along the way. Otherwise, this servant would still be sick and unable to get up. I'm afraid this task would have been delayed. What are you talking about? I can do my best for your Majesty's sake. Yes, that's true. Chief Steward Qing nodded repeatedly in agreement. Then, he tactfully smiled and said, It's windy and snowy. Why don't Lord Qin and Princess Consort return to the Fu first? Shall I go directly to your Majesty now? Qin Yining was an extramarital wife, so she naturally did not need to enter the palace to meet the emperor. Qin Huaiyuan naturally smiled and nodded, saying, Since that's the case, I won't delay Chief Steward Chang's errand. Please. You flatter me, you flatter me. Chief Steward Qing and Qin Huaiyuan exchanged a few more pleasantries before leading their group into the city. Qin Huaiyuan smiled and said, Let's go. We'll also go home first. Everything can wait until we get home. Yes. Qin Yining nodded with a smile. Both master and servant boarded the carriage. Qin Yining ordered someone to drive the carriage behind Qin Huaiyuan's carriage. Qin Huaiyuan's entourage's carriage followed at the end of the procession. They headed in the direction of the new prince's mansion, which was bestowed by the emperor. This new prince's mansion was built using the original official residence as the foundation. Of course, it couldn't be compared to the prince's mansion that had been burned to the ground. However, the two families were still well off when they moved in. Qin Yining's carriage entered through the side gate and walked side by side with Qin Huaiyuan. Qin Huayuan smiled and said, "Since you're back, you should go to old Master Yao and your mother-in-law's place to pay your respects first. After that, you can come home. Your grandmother and second aunt have already prepared a meal. Your uncle is also at home." Qin Yining nodded seriously, "Okay. I understand." Qin Huayuan didn't invite Yao Qinggu and the Yao clan. Qin Yining knew that perhaps it was because it was inconvenient for the two families to live in the same courtyard. There would be some friction between them. Qin Huayuan wasn't someone who liked to stir up trouble, but he wasn't a pushover either. The Yao clan was the same as the old madam. They weren't easy to deal with. If the two families bumped into each other, it was possible that there would be some friction. However, the reason why the two families lived together was because there was no other way. Pang Xiao and her weren't at home. With limited manpower, it was naturally best for them to live together and protect each other. Moreover, no matter how smart Yao Qinggu and the Yao clan were, they were still inferior to Qin Huayuan. If they lived together, Qin Huayuan could take care of them. This was to prevent the Yao clan and Yao Qinggu from accidentally doing something that angered the heavens. Even so, when there were more people, there would be more emotions. She didn't know what exactly happened that made Qin Huayuan treat the Yao clan's father and daughter so coldly. Qin Yining followed Qin Huayuan through the spacious gravel road. They walked around a frozen mirror lake and came to a fork in the road. Qin Huayuan smiled and said, "Inside is Master Yao's courtyard. Yu and Jishi's courtyard is next to theirs. This way is the guest courtyard where our family is temporarily staying. Father will go back first. You can come back after paying your respects." "Yes. I understand." Qin Yining nodded and had Bing Tang and the others follow the unfamiliar servant girl to the courtyard to put away their luggage. He brought Ji Yun and found a servant girl to lead the way to Yao Qinggu and the Yao clan's courtyard. After walking for a few hundred steps, they turned a corner and arrived at a courtyard. There was a black plaque with green paint on it and the words, "Chunhui Hall," were written on it. Qin Yining smiled and ordered the maidservants to report to her. In reality, Qin Yining knew what was going on. When she entered the fu, she saw a manservant quietly run away when he saw her. He must have gone to report to Master Yao and the Yao clan. Qin Yining and Ji Yun stood in front of the door. The servant girl quickly went forward to knock on the door. The old servant girl guarding the door quickly pushed the door open. When she saw Qin Yining, she hurriedly came forward with a smile and bowed, "Greetings to Princess Consort. No need for formalities. Are Master Yao and old Madam here?" "Yes, yes. Just now, old Madam ordered the servant to come out and see if Princess Consort has returned. She missed you very much." Qin Yining smiled and nodded. He raised his hand to indicate for the servant girl to withdraw and then brought Ji Yun into the courtyard. Qin Yining recognized some of the servants in the corridor, but there were also some unfamiliar ones. However, when they saw Qin Yining, they were all very respectful. A servant girl turned to the side and opened the dark red bamboo curtain in the main room for Qin Yining. A wave of warm air mixed with the strong smell of smoke rushed into the room and formed a white mist in the gap of the curtain. Qin Yining took off the cloak on his shoulders and handed it to Ji Yun. Then, he quickly walked around the screen with cloud inscriptions carved on the corners of the screen and walked into the inner room. Yao Qinggu and Yao clan were sitting on the warm kong by the window and talking. Yao Qinggu was smoking a cigarette and the room was filled with smoke. Yao clan was peeling peanuts and eating them. Her skirt and sleeves were stained with a lot of peanut skin. Qin Yining came forward and curtsied, "Greetings to Master Yao and old Madam." Yao Qinggu raised his eyelids and exhaled through the smoke. The smoke in front of him immediately became thicker. "You're back. Get up." "Thank you, Master Yao." Qin Yining straightened up and stood with his hands hanging down. Yao Clan patted the powder on her hands and brushed the peanut skin on her sleeves and thighs. She frowned and said, "Why didn't you bring my grandson back?" Replying to Old Madam, Brother Zhao and Brother Han were taken by Old Madam and my mother to visit my grandmother in the south. As soon as Old Madam saw them, she liked them very much and didn't want to be separated from them for a moment. I had no choice but to let the two elders take them out. Hearing that Qin Yining pushed Madame Ma out, Yao Clan was speechless for a while. She changed the topic and said, "What Brother Zhao and Brother Han? Who named them?" Replying to Old Madam, it was Wang Yi who named them Ruzhao and Ruin. Wang Yi said that Old Madam said that the Pang family's generation all had the word Ruzhao. Both Ruzhao and Ruin have the meaning of brightness. They not only inherit the incense of the Pang family, but also have a good meaning. So, Wang Yi named them. Yao Clan was speechless again. Pang Ruzhao and Pang Ruin were really nice names. They sounded better than Xiangbao and Yubao in her imagination. But it really made her feel uncomfortable. The Pang family never looked at her seriously. Why should the children she raised with difficulty pass on the bloodline of the Pang family for nothing? Just thinking about it made her angry. Yao Clan was unhappy, so her tone was not good. "Your belly is not bad. You are lucky to give birth to two boys in one fell swoop. But you have to take care of yourself. After all, as a wife, it is not beautiful to have a stain. Your body may not be good after giving birth. You should choose two girls with good family backgrounds for Wang Yi to live in. When they give birth to a boy or a girl, they will have to call you mother, right? Not only will you get a few children for nothing, but they will also be the blood of the Pang family." Qin Yining suddenly raised her head. Her almond-shaped eyes contained a faint cold light. It was as cold as a sharp blade flashing under the moonlight. Yao Clan's words were stuck in her throat. She was stunned and couldn't say anything. This little girl had been away for more than a year. How did she have a temper? She actually dared to stare at her like this. Qin Yining raised her head, puffed out her chest, and stood up straight. "Is it Old Madam's right to slander the identity of her own grandson?" "What do you mean?" "Old Madam, you know very well what I mean. I am indeed lucky to have two boys in one fell swoop. That is also my good karma for doing good deeds. Old Madam, you have slandered and slandered me time and time again. Everyone in the manor is talking about slandering me and my two children. You don't care about me, your daughter-in-law, but don't you care about your own grandson? Don't you care about the mother-son relationship between you and Wang Yi? Do you think slandering me can show off Old Madam's authority? Old Madam, aren't you afraid of karma? What kind of attitude is this? Which family's girl has rules like yours? No wonder people call you a barbarian. Old Madam, since you don't like me, you can ask Wang Yi to divorce me. I will take my children and leave." "How dare you? If I divorce you, you can leave on your own. It will not be your turn to take away my Pang family's children." Qin Yining sneered, "You've been in the Pang family for many years, you have rich experience. Naturally you know what kind of girl has no stain on her name, and her family background is clean. You're asking Wang Ye to take her in and give birth to a son or a daughter. In any case, she's a legitimate descendant of the Pang family, isn't she?" Chapter 763. Rebel. Rebel. You dare to threaten your mother-in-law. How can there be such a poisonous whore like you in this world? Yao Clan could no longer sit still. She suddenly grabbed a small bamboo box and threw it at Qin Yining. The peanuts, pine nuts, and hazelnuts inside scattered all over the floor. Yao Qinggu was displeased and said, "Why do you need to argue with her? You're her mother-in-law. Don't tell me you need to discipline your daughter-in-law yourself. Aren't you afraid of losing your status? Yao Clan was reminded by her father and repeatedly called out, someone come. The maidservants outside the room who had been listening for a long time looked at each other in dismay and hesitantly walked in. A group of people stood outside with their heads lowered and asked, "What orders does old madam have?" "Lock this poisonous whore in the woodshed for me. She doesn't know how to be filial to her mother-in-law and verbally contradicts her. I want to teach her the rules." Ji Yun hugged Qin Yining's cloak and stood guard beside her. She put one hand on the buckle of the soft sword at her waist and sternly scolded, "I want to see who dares." The group of maidservants stopped in their tracks. Qin Yining calmly looked at Yao Qinggu and Yao Clan. She couldn't help but wonder how Pang Xiao could have this kind of mother and maternal grandfather. However, they were still Pang Xiao's relatives. It was already unreasonable for her to verbally contradict them. In the end, she couldn't do anything to them, even if it was for Pang Xiao's sake. Thinking of this, Qin Yining only felt helpless and said, "Old master, old madam, I am your majesty's personal envoy. I specially returned to the capital to supervise the Taitan Princess Tana's marriage. Tomorrow, your majesty will summon me. If you want to do anything, please think twice." Yao Clan was so angry that they almost fainted. Just a sentence of your majesty's order was enough to shut her up. If she really locked her up and delayed her work, Qin Yining wouldn't be the only one who would suffer, but the entire prince's household would suffer. "How dare you threaten me?" "I wouldn't dare. I'm just telling the truth. My son is blind to have married such a vicious woman like you. You seduced my son before you were even married, seducing him to the point that he only wanted you. You even rejected the chance to be the emperor's son-in-law. Now, you're disrespecting your mother-in-law while my son isn't home. You're simply not worthy of being a son. I'm going to tell my son to divorce you, you unchaste, poisonous woman." The Yao clan's words were getting worse and worse. Qin Yining was so angry that his face turned red, but he didn't want to argue with them anymore. Because she knew that arguing with this kind of person wouldn't work. "Then write a letter to Wang Yi and ask Wang Yi to divorce me. I'll wait for your good news." Qin Yining raised her chin proudly. She was beautiful to begin with, and now that she was angry, she looked even more aggressive. When Yao Clan met her eyes, there was anger and jealousy. They couldn't tell which emotion was more. Qin Yining bowed to Yao Qinggu and Yao Clan with proper etiquette, then turned around and walked out with Ji Yun. None of the servants gathered in front of the door dared to stop them. They were so scared that they shrunk their shoulders and lowered their heads. Without Qin Yining saying anything, they all stepped aside to let them pass. Qin Yining took the cloak and put it on, then quickly left the courtyard. Although there was only her and Ji Yun, master and servant, they walked out with the momentum of a magnificent army. Yao Clan felt like they had been slapped in the face. In front of so many servants, they didn't even have the upper hand. For a moment, they felt like they had lost all face. She angrily reprimanded, "Don't you know how to obey orders? Why didn't you follow my orders just now? Old madam, we servants, don't dare. You don't even dare to deal with a little girl. Am I not the mistress of this family? With my support, what are you afraid of? You're all so spirited on normal days, but when faced with a little girl, you all shrink back. What's the use of raising you?" Yao Clan's anger was vented on these servants. They were so scared that they kept quiet out of fear. One after another, they bent their bodies like quails. Yao Qinggu knocked the brass pipe on the edge of the Kong bed. He coughed and said, "All right, you all can leave." The servants acted as if they had been pardoned. They bowed and retreated. When they reached the door, they turned around and scattered. Yao Clan sat on the edge of the Kong bed and sulked. Yao Qinggu said, "You're so impatient. With such a ruckus, won't you be at a disadvantage right from the start? Can't you suppress your temper a little? If you don't like her, then don't pay attention to her. If you suspect that the child she raised isn't Dai Fu's child, then marry a good girl to Dai Fu. But you're good. You've already told her what you're going to do. Now that she's on guard, she might go back and write a letter to Dai Fu to complain about you. What will you do? She dares." Yao Clan put on a strong front. When she saw Qin Yining now, she remembered how much she had suffered in the past. Dai Fu was estranged from her. Even her own mother scolded her whenever she saw her. She especially picked those ugly words to scold her. Now that Qin Yining came back, he didn't bring her grandson back to kowtow to her. Instead, he asked her mother to take the child away. Wasn't this not treating her as a mother-in-law? She was also confused by the situation. After being reminded by Yao Qinggu, she came back to her senses. For a moment, she felt like her intestines were about to turn green with regret. Yao Qinggu shook his head and continued to smoke. No matter how Yao Clan thought about it, she felt that something was wrong. She couldn't let Qin Yining gain the upper hand. She immediately got up and returned to her room. She picked up her brush and began to write a letter to Pang Xiao. As for Qin Yining, after leaving Chunhui Hall, his footsteps gradually slowed down. Ji Yun was so angry that her face and neck turned red. She turned around and spat fiercely, "Pay! What the hell?" Qin Yining slowly walked forward. He lowered his head and looked at the tips of his shoes. He said sullenly, "Don't be like this. It's not good if people see. Princess Consort is just too good-natured." She didn't even think it was bad for her to say those dirty words. Do you still want to care about her face? She's Wang Ye's mother after all. If she loses face, won't Wang Yi lose face too? Princess Consort shouldn't have let her have her way. This servant was so angry that I almost drew my sword. If you drew your sword in her room, she could say that we wanted to assassinate her. In the future, other than meeting in the morning and evening, we should try not to meet her. It's not a big deal. She treated Princess Consort like this, yet Princess Consort is still muddle-headed. Ji Yun exclaimed. Qin Yining sighed and didn't say anything else. Ji Yun suppressed her anger and walked behind Qin Yining. She thought about how formidable Princess Consort was. She had never suffered any losses when facing the Totters. Instead, she had to suffer such vexation. Princess Consort, it's better if you tell Wang Yi about this when you go back. Otherwise, she will say bad things about you in front of Wang Yi. Qin Yining shook his head and sighed, Wang Yi already has enough trouble. We don't know what the new prefectural magistrate is like. He also has Yuqi Yen and Yuqi Shujie, two big mountains. He also has the Qiu family behind him. We don't know what's going on over there. Wang Yi isn't willing to tell me about the troublesome matters, but it doesn't mean that he doesn't have trouble around him. We can't help him, but we should at least do something to not cause trouble for him. Chapter 764. Ji Yun felt depressed, but since Wang Fei had ordered her, she couldn't do anything other than nod. She couldn't act on her own and ruin Wang Fei's plans. Thinking of this, Ji Yun could only nod and say with heartache, but Wang Fei will feel wronged like this. You've suffered so much for Wang Yi, and people outside are still talking bad about you. Now that you're home, you can't feel at ease and you're being slandered. If this continues, how long will you endure? You've done so much for Wang Yi, but Wang Yi doesn't know about it. Also, I don't know if Wang Yi will help his mother to misunderstand you. The more Ji Yun thought about it, the more conflicted she felt. The more she analyzed, the more she felt wronged for Qin Yining. Her tears were about to fall. Qin Yining smiled and said, "There's nothing to feel wronged about. Maybe when I didn't know, he also suffered a lot and just didn't want to tell me. Also, even if Wang Yi helps old madam, there's nothing wrong with that. After all, she's his mother." Ji Yun felt helpless and sighed heavily. But she also understood that it wasn't good for her to continue speaking. Since Wang Fei had thought things through, she could only comfort her and not sow discord. If she really disturbed Wang Fei and Wang Ye's foster marriage, wouldn't that be a sin? When Qin Yining returned to the guest courtyard, he had already adjusted his mentality and didn't look strange at all. The maidservant was guarding outside. When she saw Qin Yining, she immediately came forward to greet him and happily welcomed him in. As soon as he entered the central room, he was greeted by the warm air mixed with the fragrance of food. Qin Yining took off his cloak, walked around the screen, and entered the room. He saw old madam sitting at the head of the table. 8th Miss and Qin Huining were standing on either side of old madam. Qin Huayuan was sitting next to old madam. 2nd madam, 2nd old master, and 3rd old master were all sitting in order. Behind them stood eldest cousin brother Qin Yu, 2nd cousin brother Qin Han, 2nd sister-in-law Madam Meng, 5th cousin brother Qin Xian, 10th cousin brother Qin Rong, 11th cousin brother Qin Zong, and cousin nephew Qin Yuzhen. As soon as she saw Qin Yining enter the door, Mammy Qin hurried to greet her with a smile. "Oh, my great aunt, I missed you so much." Mammy Qin bowed to Qin Yining excitedly. How could Qin Yining accept Mammy Qin's salute? After all, she had served old madam all her life. She hurriedly turned sideways to avoid it and returned half a salute. "How has Mammy Qin been?" Okay. As she spoke, she personally laid out a thick praying mat for Qin Yining on the floor. Qin Yining knelt down and bowed to old madam properly. Granddaughter pays respect to old madam. Although old madam didn't like Qin Yining, she still missed her after not seeing her for a long time. In addition, she had fallen ill twice this year, and her health was not as good as before. Furthermore, Qin Huayuan often whispered some things in her ear, so her thoughts were gradually being affected. Therefore, when she saw Qin Yining, she didn't oppose her like before. Instead, she smiled and nodded repeatedly. Quickly get up. Come here, come to grandmother." Qin Yining was a little surprised by old madam's attitude. However, when she saw Qin Huayuan smiling, she knew what was going on. She smiled and bowed to 2nd old master, 2nd old madam, and 3rd old master before going to old madam's side. Old madam took Qin Yining's hand and let her sit down next to her. "Good child, you've been away for a year. You've suffered. Granddaughter is ashamed to have troubled old madam. I've heard from your father. You bought back our family's old residence and renovated it, didn't you?" Qin Yining smiled and nodded. "Yes, that's our home after all. The interior has been completely renovated, but the layout and furnishings haven't changed. It's still the same as it was before. When I returned this time, I stayed in Snow Pear Courtyard. As for the other courtyards, appropriate people have been arranged to look after the rooms." Good, that's really good." When old madam thought of that residence, countless memories surged into her mind. Ever since she married into Qin Manor, all the memories, good and bad, were entangled with that residence when the hall was still there. Originally, when the country was ruined and the family had sold their wealth, the residence, which was mostly burned down by the fire, was sold at a low price, and the money had long been used up. She didn't expect that one day, that old residence would be returned to the Qin family. In this way, even if she closed her eyes one day and went to see her elders and husband in the afterlife, she would have an explanation. Old madam smiled, but her eyes were already filled with tears. 2nd madam hurriedly coaxed her. You've been thinking about your granddaughter all day long. You should be happy that she's back. Why are you crying again? It's a happy occasion that our family has a regiment member. Everyone hurriedly coaxed her. Old Madam stopped crying and nodded repeatedly. Yes, it's a good thing. It's a happy occasion. Your second uncle is also seeking a vacancy now. Your cousin and younger brother are both studying. Also, eighth sister and Miss Huining have already agreed to marry each other. They will be getting married in the new year. Our family's life is gradually getting better, and everything is stable. Even if I close my eyes one day, I won't let my ancestors down. Old Madam, don't say that. You're a person with Dai Fu. Our family's good fortune is still to come. Everyone talked at once to coax Old Madam until Old Madam laughed. Qin Yining then asked with a smile, which family did eighth sister and Miss Huining get engaged to? Have you confirmed it? It's already confirmed. Third Old Master smiled and said, the other party is from a family of farmers and scholars. He's the second son of a concubine. I've seen him. That young man's temperament is very good. He's a good match for our eighth girl. In addition, our family has a relationship with eldest brother and Wang Yi. I believe that eighth girl won't suffer any losses after she gets married. Eighth young miss was third Old Master's concubine's daughter. Qin Huayuan said, the one who looked at Sister Hui is also from a family of farmers and scholars. The other party is also the fourth son of a concubine. His ancestors have quite a lot of property and he's also the son of a concubine. Previously, they discussed a dormitory, but the girl who was supposed to be there fell ill and left. Lung Juan's marriage was delayed. Now that I've seen them, I feel that they're very good. They're from a family that knows their place. Thus, we decided on them. Qin Yining nodded and said with a smile, if father and third uncle think they're good, then they're definitely good. When our family's girls go out, first of all, they can't be bullied. Eighth young miss and Qin Huining's faces burned. Perhaps it was because of the thought of waiting for their daughter to be married, but the two of them withdrew their original thoughts and focused on preparing for marriage. Eighth young miss was truly satisfied. Although Qin Huining sometimes thought about what would happen if Qin Yining didn't come back and she was still Qin Huayuan's concubine's daughter, what would happen in the end? But now, she had to rely on her family Qin. She even had to rely on Qin Yining's identity as a Wangfei. Many of her thoughts were just thoughts in her heart. Qin Yining could become a Wangfei. She only hoped that she could also be a rich madam and live her own life. In the future, she would be content if she minded her own business. Old Madam smiled and said, the food has already been prepared. Everyone, quickly take your seats. The food will get cold if you're late. The whole family smiled and agreed. They sat around the 3 square tables according to their identities. Qin Huayuan held a wine cup and was about to speak when a servant quickly walked in from outside. Chapter 765. The front hall, which had been bustling with noise and excitement, instantly quieted down. Everyone couldn't help but look back at Qin Huayuan, waiting for him to make a decision. Qin Huayuan put down his wine cup and said gently, since that's the case, the family banquet can be held later. Sister Yi, follow me to the front hall first. This should be for the marriage ambassador. Qin Yining immediately understood. It should be like what Lu Hing said. Before Princess Tana arrived, she still had to learn the ancient etiquette, so as not to lose face in front of the foreigners. Qin Yining and Qin Huayuan stood up and went to the front. The rest of the people looked at each other, thought for a moment, and also stood up and followed. The family left the guest courtyard, and the servant girl led the way with a lantern. Everyone silently left the guest courtyard and took a detour to the front hall of the prince's mansion. Seeing the people in the hall, Qin Yining smiled and went up to greet them. Chief Steward Qing. Greetings, Princess. Chief Steward Qing smiled and bowed, then turned to greet Qin Huayuan and the large family behind him. For a person as exquisite as Chief Steward Qing, if he wanted to be on good terms with others, there wouldn't be any flaws in his etiquette. The old madam and the others saw that Qin Yining was familiar with this eunuch, and that this eunuch's attitude was very amiable, so everyone was slightly relieved. Chief Steward Qing smiled and said, "This servant is here to pass on your Majesty's order to invite Princess to Cunning Palace tomorrow, where Her Majesty the Empress will personally teach you the etiquette until the Tatan's marriage team arrives." Hearing this, Qin Yining hurriedly bowed in the direction of the imperial palace and said respectfully, "This servant obeys the order. Many thanks for your Majesty's kindness." Chief Steward Qing then smiled and said, "Princess must be tired from the journey, so please rest well today. This servant won't disturb Princess and Lord Qin's family reunion. This servant will take my leave." Qin Huayuan walked up with a smile and gently sent Chief Steward Qing out, then handed him a red envelope where no one could see. "Thank you, Chief Qing. Lord Qin, this servant thanks Lord Qin for the reward. This is what this servant should do." Chief Steward Qing said courteously as he tucked Feng Hong into his sleeve. His smile became even more amiable. After exchanging a few more pleasantries, Chief Steward Qing took his leave. The family Qin returned to the guest courtyard. Seeing that the atmosphere was somewhat heavy, Qin Yining smiled and said, "Don't worry. It's not difficult to learn the rules of the Empress's palace. In addition, I had a relationship with the Empress in the past, so it shouldn't be a problem." When Li Qitian was buried in the underground palace, it was she who took the risk to deliver a letter to the Empress Dowager. It was also because of them that the pregnant Empress was nailed to death in the Palace of Earthly Tranquility by Prince Li and was rescued as quickly as possible. Thinking about it, even if they were not too close, the Empress should not have too much ill feelings towards her. Everyone should complete their own tasks and deal with this period of time. Qin Yining did not believe that the Empress would be able to teach her any rules and etiquette. Thinking about it, Li Qitian had only issued this decree to make himself look good. When the time came, the person teaching the rules should be someone else, but it should be arranged to be in the Empress's palace, right? Qin Yining's guess was correct. The next day, Qin Yining came to the Palace of Earthly Tranquility. As expected, she saw the Mama teaching the rules. The Empress stood with a smile and gently helped Qin Yining up. She said with a smile, "Wang Fei does not need to be so courteous. There are no outsiders here, so there is no need to pay attention to those complicated formalities." It had only been a year, but the Empress's hair had turned gray. She also looked more haggard than before. The thick and heavy clothing and the bright pearls on her head did not add to her appearance. Instead, it made her look more haggard. It was as if she could not bear such wealth. Qin Yining sighed inwardly. It was actually very embarrassing to not be able to match her position. It was not that the Empress did not have the ability. It was just that there were too many changes that she had to accept and learn to do in an instant, from an ordinary woman of a small wealthy family to the mother of a country. What's more, there had always been a saying, "Repent and teach your husband to seek the title of Marquis." Li Qitian had few children, so he had many concubines on his left and right. In addition, the Empress was not a beautiful woman, and she was not young anymore. Before Li Qitian became the emperor, the Empress had lived many days of fear and trepidation. When a woman's life was not smooth, she naturally aged faster. Li Qitian liked those young and beautiful concubines more and more. This was a vicious cycle. However, it was unknown whether it was destined by the heavens, but Li Qitian only had one legitimate son. As Qin Yining's thoughts flashed, she had already stood up and respectfully stood with her hands hanging down. This subject is very grateful for the Empress's kindness. However, this subject does not dare to act rashly. This subject does not dare to act rashly. The Empress smiled slightly and pulled Qin Yining to sit down in the rose chair that she had prepared for her. She ordered her personal palace maid to serve tea. Wang Fei does not need to be so reserved. In the past, Your Majesty and Prince Zhongshuan were sworn brothers. Their families often interacted with each other and got along like a family. However, now that the country has been established, they are far away from each other and are both busy. There are fewer opportunities to get along like before. Realizing that the topic she was talking about was slightly sensitive, the Empress smiled and said, "What I mean is, based on our relationship in the past, you and I are like sisters-in-law. Therefore, when there are no outsiders, Wang Fei really does not need to be so reserved." Qin Yining smiled and said, "Yes, this subject understands. Your Majesty the Empress is a motherly model of the country and has a benevolent heart. This is this subject's blessing and also the blessing of all the women in the world." The Empress smiled and did not force anything. Qin Yining was too careful. The Empress also understood why Qin Yining was so careful. It was not that the Empress did not know about the discord between Li Qitian and Pang Xiao. However, after so many years of turbulence, especially after ascending to the position of Empress, there was mutual deception everywhere. There was no one in the palace that she could treat with sincerity, including her mother-in-law and younger sister-in-law, not to mention her husband who was already the emperor. The Empress often felt that she was an extra person. She even fantasized about what life would be like if Li Qitian was not the emperor. Especially after the last palace coup, the Empress Dowager and Princess Royal only cared about themselves. However, they did not care about her pregnancy and what would happen if she was locked up by Prince Li. Prince Zhongshuan was an outsider, but she still risked her pregnancy to enter the palace to deliver a letter and tell them about Your Majesty. However, the Empress Dowager and Princess Royal, one was Your Majesty's biological mother, and the other was Your Majesty's biological younger sister. They were both afraid. In the end, didn't they still let Your Majesty wait for someone to rescue him? She suffered so much with Your Majesty, but in the end, didn't she still break off her relationship with him? Your Majesty did not depose her, the Empress, who he did not like, in fact, because Your Majesty cherished his reputation. With this understanding and thinking, the Empress was actually disheartened. Li Qitian arranged for her to teach Qin Yining the rules. She thought that under her own eyes, she could at least protect Qin Yining from being bullied. No matter how the struggle between men was, she still remembered Qin Yining's help. The Empress's heart was spinning, but she did not show it on her face. She warmly chatted with Qin Yining, asking about life in the south and the situation at home. She mainly talked about the children. The little prince was 3 months younger than Zhao Guo and Han Guo. He was at his cutest and most clingy age. When two mothers who both loved their children were together, they always had a lot to talk about. After chatting for a while, although they were not so close that they wanted to open their hearts, there were not so many barriers between them. Qin Yining felt the Empress's goodwill towards her. Thinking about it, as long as it did not affect her husband's interests, this woman was also willing to be on good terms with her. The two chatted for a while. Seeing that it was almost time, the Empress stood up with a smile and said, "Today is your first time entering the palace after coming back. Although I have already arranged for a mama to teach you the rules, we still have to go to Xi'an Palace to greet the Empress Dowager." "Yes, we will follow Nyang Nyang's arrangements." Qin Yining nodded in understanding. In reality, she had already planned to greet the Empress Dowager. The Empress Dowager was not as gentle and magnanimous as the Empress. She was a woman who was not easy to get along with. She was essentially the same type of person as Li Helan. The Empress saw that Qin Yining had no objections and had people prepare clothes to wear outside. She left Qiankuan Palace with her and walked towards Xi'an Palace. Ji Yun and Bing Tang followed behind Qin Yining and the Empress. They walked together with the palace servants who served the Empress. The wooden stakes tied to their feet made crunching sounds when they stepped on the snow. Qin Yining hugged a hand warmer and chatted with the Empress with a smile. The capital is really too cold. On the way back, the closer we got to the capital, the colder it got. By the time we were about to reach the suburbs of the capital, I was so cold that I didn't want to get off the carriage. The Empress smiled when she heard this. She saw that Qin Yining had half her face buried in the white fur collar. Her nose was red from the cold and she was hugging a hand warmer. She was dressed very thickly. She smiled and said, "I forgot, you are a true southerner. It is normal for you to not get used to the weather in the north for a while. I don't feel that this weather is cold. In the past, during this season, I still had to chop firewood and do work outside." Qin Yining smiled and said, "This subject's wife is the same as Nyang Nyang. I also have to do this." Fortunately, the winters where this subject's wife was born were not so cold. Otherwise, I might not have been so lucky to grow up. The Empress knew a bit about Qin Yining's experience when she was young. Hearing this, she couldn't help but ask curiously, "Where did you live?" It was near Liang City. At the time, it was on the border between Dezhou and the Yan dynasty. The border. Then wouldn't there be frequent wars? That's right. Qin Yining nodded and said, "But thanks to your Majesty's army defeating Beiji, the commoners were slowly able to live in peace and contentment. I think that in the future, there will never be a situation where the commoners at the border are forced to hide in the mountains." The Empress smiled and nodded. "You are right." They chatted and laughed along the way to Xi'an Palace. Unexpectedly, before the palace servants could announce their arrival, Qin Yining heard a burst of bell-like laughter. Looking in the direction of the sound, she saw a group of people walking over from afar. The leader of the group was a beautiful woman wearing a red cloak and a sable fur hat. The woman looked to be in her 20s. She had curved eyebrows and a small cherry-like mouth. She was a very attractive beauty. Chapter 766. Qin Yining slightly furrowed his brows when he saw this. He lowered his head in greeting to hide his emotions. Although the beauty's greeting was as gentle as a dance, strictly speaking, her posture was very arrogant and her actions were perfunctory. She did not hide her disrespect for the Empress at all. She did not even wait for the Empress to speak before she stood up on her own. She swayed her slender waist and walked over with her red cloak wrapped around her skirt. Qin Yining and the other palace maids stood up. Because they were standing next to the Empress, they could see the person's red cloak as she came closer. Red was pure red. According to Dezhou's rules, only the wife of the first wife could wear it. Could this be a newly married woman from a minister's family? The Empress' expression was calm and her voice was still gentle as she introduced her to Qin Yining. "This is Consort Yun, the Empress Dowager's niece." Qin Yining's brows slightly raised. Consort Yun, a concubine, dared to wear pure red in the palace. It had to be known that in the palace, other than the women who came to pay their respects, only the Empress had the right to wear this color. Wasn't this a blatant provocation? Because she was the Empress Dowager's niece, she was unrestrained. If that was the case, then there was nothing to fear from this Consort Yun. Only a brainless person would act so arrogantly and not know how to be cautious. She did not leave a way out for herself at all. So it was Consort Yun Nyang Nyang. This subject pays respects to Nyang Nyang. Qin Yining did not look at the naturally charming beauty and curtsied in greeting. Consort Yun glanced at Qin Yining. When she saw Qin Yining's appearance and bearing, she immediately pursed her lips in displeasure. She felt a strong sense of danger. The Empress saw Consort Yun's expression and understood. She quickly introduced, little sister consort Yun entered the palace late. Perhaps you don't know Prince Zhongshuan's consort. This is Prince Zhongshuan's consort. She just returned to the capital from the south. Hearing that this woman was a Wangfei, consort Yun's heart relaxed. She disdainfully curled her lips and raised her hand to touch her hair. But what does a little Wangfei count for? Her man is your majesty. Imperial concubine Yun completely ignored Qin Yining and taunted, the empress is truly busy. She's already so late in paying respects. Wouldn't he be disrespectful to the empress dowager? You don't want to be filial. Qin Yining stood to the side, discreetly sizing up this person. His impression of imperial concubine Yi was already extremely poor. However, she was just a woman with an external title, so she had no right to interrupt. The empress smiled in an extremely good-natured manner and only said, "It's not too late at this hour. The empress dowager may have just gotten up. Since we've met, let's go together." Imperial concubine Yun curled her lips. Even with such a rude and disrespectful expression, when imperial concubine Yun made it, it still gave off a charming feeling. The empress really knows how to curry favor. If we're going, it should be this concubine going first. Otherwise, the empress dowager will think that we came together. How dare he be so impudent? Qin Yining's brows slightly knit together. When he looked at imperial concubine Yun, his gaze became more profound. Imperial concubine Yun had been beautiful since she was young, so she was used to people looking at her. However, after entering the palace, because of the Empress Dowager's favoritism and Your Majesty's love for her, it had been a long time since anyone dared to stare at her so impudently. Imperial concubine Yun sneered as she looked at Qin Yining. She was wearing a red short jacket with arrow sleeves, a white embroidered skirt, and a snow-white fox fur cloak. She was holding a small copper heater. Her entire person was exquisite and beautiful, just like a person from a painting. Imperial concubine Yun's smile became even colder. "You servant, you actually dare to stare at this concubine. Just now, I didn't punish you for being negligent in paying respects, but now you've come knocking on my door. What, just because the Empress likes you, you dare to disregard the rules of the palace and do as you please in front of the Empress Dowager's palace?" Qin Yining's calm face finally showed some fluctuations. She seemed to be able to see through everything as she coldly looked at Imperial concubine Yun. She said in a tone that was neither servile nor overbearing, "Imperial concubine Yun, it's best if you restrain your temper." "What did you say?" Imperial concubine Yun's eyes widened and her voice rose. She never thought that Qin Yining would say something like this. "You, what kind of thing are you? A lowly servant dares to criticize this concubine. Do you really think that with the Empress backing you, you can look down on this concubine?" Qin Yining lightly said, "Imperial concubine Yun speaking of the palace rules is truly laughable. If you really understand the palace rules, then this subject may ask what the cloak on Imperial concubine Yun's body is. The Empress is your Majesty's wife. In this palace, aside from the other wives, only the Empress has the right to wear red. Imperial concubine Yun is looking down on the palace rules and disrespecting the Empress. How should you be punished?" Imperial concubine Yun's face turned red from anger. She lowered her head to look at her own red cloak and her lips moved. After a while, she said, "Even the Empress Dowager and Empress haven't said that this concubine shouldn't wear this cloak. You're just a lowly servant, what right do you have to criticize this concubine?" Her eyes turned and she saw the small jacket underneath Qin Yining's clothes. She sneered, "Then look at yourself. You said that I shouldn't wear red, but aren't you wearing it?" Qin Yining sneered, "This subject is Prince Zhongshuan's official wife. May I ask who you are?" "You. Impudent. You actually dare to speak to this concubine like this. Someone come, drag this impudent servant out for this concubine. Impudent. This subject is your Majesty's first-rank noble lady. May I ask what rank you are? You keep calling this subject a lowly servant or servant. This subject wants to ask, is this subject's first-rank noble lady only a servant in your eyes? This subject and Prince Zhongshuan are husband and wife. If this subject is also a servant, then what is Prince Zhongshuan? You empathize with your subjects, but when it comes to you, you unscrupulously belittle your subjects. May I ask, who gave you this kind of courage? Impudent. Impudent. You're the one who's eaten a bear's heart and leopard's guts. You dare to speak to this concubine. Someone come, beat her 100 times for this concubine. Beat her out. Beat her out. The palace maids behind Imperial concubine Yun looked at each other and hesitantly wanted to step forward. I'll see who dares. Qin Yining straightened his back and coldly swept his gaze over those people. The palace maids stopped in their tracks, not daring to move. The Empress is benevolent and kind, giving way to Imperial concubine Yun in all aspects. However, Imperial concubine Yun is spoiled and overbearing. A mere concubine dares to overstep the rules of the palace. You even dare to make a fuss in front of the Empress. The Empress hasn't said anything yet, but you, as an Imperial concubine, dare to try and punish a first-rank noble lady. May I ask, Imperial concubine Yun, who gave you this power and who gave you this courage? You. Imperial concubine Yun gasped for breath as she pointed her slender jade finger at Qin Yining. She was the emperor's woman. Qin Yining was only Wang Ye's woman. In her heart, she was much more noble than Qin Yining. She never thought that Qin Yining would embarrass her like this. In front of so many palace maids, this matter could spread throughout the palace in the blink of an eye. How would she be able to live in the future? Imperial concubine Yun was so angry that her face turned red. She actually began to sob. Qin Yining saw that Imperial concubine Yun was the type to throw a tantrum when she couldn't win an argument. She speechlessly looked at the Empress and respectfully bowed. Empress, this subject thinks that Imperial concubine Yun should follow this subject and learn etiquette from the mama. You can't even distinguish between palace rules and status. If the Taiten princess and her entourage came and met you, wouldn't you be seen as a joke by the Taiten people? The Empress's heart was refreshed like never before. She never thought that Qin Yining would so happily teach Imperial concubine Yun a lesson. This was also because Imperial concubine Yun was stupid. Qin Yining's father was the Minister of Rites, Qin Huaiyuan, who was known as the Wise Panin. Her husband was the Prince Zhongshuan Pang Shao, who had outstanding military achievements. She was also not simple. She was the current head of the Qing-Tian alliance. She had helped Your Majesty take back the imperial palace. Even Your Majesty treated her with the courtesy of an official. In the face of this kind of high-ranking woman, Imperial concubine Yun was not upright and actually dared to provoke her. It would be strange if Qin Yining gave in to her. The Empress nodded happily and said with a smile, "You're right. Imperial concubine Yun's younger sister is smart and quick-witted. It must be because she hasn't been in the palace for long that she doesn't understand the rules of the palace. You can go back and learn more from Mama." Imperial concubine Yun gritted her teeth and stared at Qin Yining with tears in her eyes. If it wasn't for Qin Yining humiliating her like that, she wouldn't have been humiliated by the Empress like this. Qin Yining didn't want to cause trouble, but if someone really wanted to cause trouble in front of her, she definitely wouldn't be afraid. Since Imperial concubine Yun was glaring at her like this, she might as well openly look back. Did Imperial concubine Yun not hear the Empress' orders? Don't be smug. Imperial concubine Yun gritted her teeth and looked angrily at the Empress. She said angrily, "Pinky obeys." And the Empress said with a smile, Since that's the case, then I ask Imperial concubine Yun Mimi to first correct the rules of the palace. What did that mean? Wasn't the rules of the palace the cloak she was wearing? Correct, was she to take off the cloak in front of everyone? Imperial concubine Yun looked in disbelief at the Empress. Her eyes were filled with tears. Her appearance when tears were about to fall was pitiful. If her cloak really was taken off here today, how could she walk in the palace in the future? Empress, have you considered Pinky? Have you considered your Majesty and the Empress Dowager's feelings? The Empress furrowed her brow. Thinking of the Empress Dowager and Li Qitian, the happy feeling in her heart was immediately replaced by depression. She once again felt disheartened. What was there left in her life? There was no meaning for her to go against the Empress Dowager like this. Seeing the Empress who had been full of energy become dispirited with just one sentence, Qin Yining understood that there must be a knot in the Empress' heart. The Empress said lightly, "Tomorrow, Imperial concubine Yun will come to the Palace of Earthly Tranquility. Sun Mama. Nubi is here." A 40-year-old woman behind the Empress stood out. "Go to Imperial concubine Yun's palace and take a cloak that matches the rules. Help Imperial concubine Yun change." "Yes." Sun Mama bowed and quickly left. Chapter 767. Qin Yining and the Empress did not expect Imperial concubine Yun to act like this. The two did not react for a moment. Qin Yining had truly learned the rules in Dian. He knew that whatever he did in the palace and the rules, he would be ridiculed by others. Seeing such a disrespectful person who only knew how to complain after being disciplined, he was very surprised. "Let's go and pay respects to the Empress Dowager." The Empress forced a smile, but she still maintained her composure and did not lose her bearing as an empress. Qin Yining said yes and followed the Empress' footsteps. It had snowed heavily last night. The spacious courtyard of Ci and palace was covered with a thick layer of white carpet. The palace servants were sweeping the snow, the broom making a soft rustling sound on the snow. Seeing the Empress arrive, the palace servants put down the workers in their hands and bowed in greeting. "Greetings to the Empress." No need for formalities. The Empress had a slight smile on her face as she gently raised her hand. "Empress, please allow this servant to pass on the message." In front of the hall, the older palace servant curtsied. Although she had a slight smile on her face, she still appeared dignified. The Empress stopped and nodded. Qin Yining sighed inwardly. Standing here, he could faintly hear the sound of sobbing coming from inside the hall. It was clear that Imperial concubine Yun was crying in front of the Empress Dowager. Qin Yining looked inquiringly at the Empress. The Empress could not hide the helplessness on her face, but she still maintained her poise and smiled at Qin Yining. Qin Yining inwardly shook his head again and turned to give Ji Yun a look. Ji Yun did not immediately understand Qin Yining's meaning. However, when the palace servant came out to pass on the message and Qin Yining followed the Empress to the main hall, Ji Yun understood. She quietly fell behind the group and stood guard in front of Ci and palace. If something happened, she could rush home to report to Darren. At this time, in the Eastern Hall, Imperial concubine Yun was delicately kneeling by the Empress Dowager's legs. Her small white hand grabbed the Empress Dowager's sapphire blue dress as she cried like a flower destroyed by a storm. "Aunt, you must make a decision for Yun. Those people saw that Yun was a newcomer to the palace, so they bullied Yun. Saying that Yun doesn't know the rules, isn't that talking about Aunt?" The Empress Dowager lowered her eyes and said nothing. She picked up the teacup with her wrinkled hands and used the white porcelain lid to brush the floating tea leaves. This niece of his was too worrisome. She had a good appearance, but she didn't bring her brains into the palace. Seeing the Empress Dowager remain silent, Imperial Concubine Yun felt even more wronged. Her face was covered in tears as she held on to the Empress Dowager's skirt, unwilling to let go. "Aunt, please dote on Yun, You didn't see how domineering that Prince Zhongshuan's imperial concubine was. She even mocked Yun, for being a concubine. She mocked Yun, and looked down on the Empress Dowager. Shouldn't you teach such an arrogant servant a lesson?" The Empress Dowager put down the teacup in annoyance and said in a deep voice, "Can't you just stop for a day? Why did you provoke her again? Who does she think she is? She is only a Wangfei, how could she?" "Shut up," and scrammed to the side. The Empress Dowager raised her foot and pulled back the skirt that Imperial Concubine Yun was holding. Imperial Concubine Yun looked at the Empress Dowager in disbelief. She didn't understand why she had been told to scram. Reporting to the Empress Dowager, "The Empress and Prince Zhongshuan's imperial concubine have come to pay their respects. Let them come in." The Empress Dowager straightened her skirt with a calm face. When Qin Yining entered the hall, the first thing he saw was the rather eye-catching peony carpet. He lowered his head and walked forward, respectfully bowing. Out of the corner of his eyes, he saw Imperial Concubine Yun, whose eyes were red from crying. He felt helpless. The Empress Dowager looked at the Empress with a calm face and then revealed a slight smile. She nodded to Qin Yining and said, "Zhishi's wife has returned." "Yes, this subject's wife has just returned to the capital." "Has the Empress Dowager's health been good?" Qin Yining's attitude was respectful and concerned. The Empress Dowager rubbed her forehead and said, "You also saw it. Aijia's health is not as good as it was a few years ago. If nothing happens, it's fine. But when something happens, I immediately have a terrible headache." "The Empress Dowager is overworked," Qin Yining said with a smile. "Fortunately, the Empress Dowager has the Empress to share her burden. Only then can you take a breather." The Empress Dowager smiled, "At my age, I always want to share your Majesty's burden. The Empress is steady and has to take care of the prince. She has to put down the rake and get a broom. It's inevitable that there will be times when she can't attend to one thing and lose sight of the other. The Empress Dowager is right." The Empress bowed her head and agreed with the Empress Dowager. It's all thanks to the Empress Dowager's constant reminders that the palace is stable. Hearing this, the Empress Dowager finally gave the Empress a slightly better expression. Ever since the coup in the palace between Marquis Qingyang and Prince Li, Qin Yining had some understanding of the Empress Dowager's personality. The Empress Dowager had a strong desire for power. In the beginning, she had held the power and made decisions that were not very wise. Now, it seemed that the Empress Dowager was old and unwilling to give up power. However, Your Majesty was dissatisfied with the Empress Dowager and the Zhou family because of Marquis Qingyang. He could not support the Empress Dowager to hold the power. Therefore, the Empress Dowager could only fight for it herself. Suppressing the Empress and making the Empress yield was the only way for the Empress Dowager to maintain her present power. This arrogant and domineering but very beautiful consort was a tool for the Empress Dowager to keep the Empress in check. Choosing such a brainless person was probably because such a person was easy to control. Thinking through this, Qin Yining felt even more disgusted with the life within the palace walls. However, she had to live within the palace walls during this period of time when she was learning the ancient rites under the imperial edict and would be implicated. While thinking, the Empress Dowager reprimanded the Empress. The Empress listened with her head bowed and did not talk back. Seeing the Empress being so respectful, the Empress Dowager's mood improved greatly. She reached out a hand to Qin Yining and said with a smile, "Zhishi's wife, come to Aijia." "Yes." Qin Yining raised her spirits and walked in front of the Empress Dowager with a smile. She first bowed and then put her hand on the Empress Dowager's hand. The Empress Dowager's hand was dry and cold, making Qin Yining very uncomfortable. Patting Qin Yining's white and creamy hand, the Empress Dowager sighed with emotion, "You young people are still the best." "That's right, on this trip to the south, did you see anything interesting?" Qin Yining's heart was alarmed. She raised her spirits and said, "There wasn't anything particularly interesting. After this subject's wife gave birth, her health was not very good. I also had to take care of my 2 brothers. Due to this, I did not pay much attention to the outside world. However, one thing is certain. That place is now much more prosperous than before. This is all thanks to your Majesty's ability to rule the country." Hearing this, the Empress Dowager was very happy and nodded with a smile. She lowered her head and saw that Consort Yi had stopped crying but was still stubbornly kneeling at the side. She felt a wave of disgust in her heart. "Why aren't you getting up? Why don't you grow up? Look at Prince Zhongshuan. Sooner or later, you will be half as smart and sensible as Prince Zhongshuan. Aijia will wake up in the middle of the night laughing. Tell me, what stupid thing did you do today?" Consort Yi's tears fell again after being reprimanded. She looked at the Empress Dowager with grievance and disbelief. The Empress Dowager turned to ask Qin Yining, "Tell me, what happened just now?" Qin Yining smiled. The Empress Dowager had set a trap for her. If she did not answer well or leaned in the wrong direction, it was very likely that she would offend one side, or even both sides. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.